Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the May 7th, 2013 Board of Education business meeting. We have a quorum of members present. We will call the meeting to order. I'd like to start by introducing Connor Bowers, who is going to come to the microphone and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Connor?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Connor. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? Who's the guest you brought, where you go to school, what you like to do? Tell us about Connor.
I go to Easton Elementary and I'm in 5th grade and I'm the president of the student body.
Good for you.
My name is Connor Bowers and I brought my grandma with me because my mom's a teacher at Cascade, so she can't be here. I like to play baseball and I like soccer and I like the Orioles and the Ravens.
You're going to find a lot of friends on the board here if you like the Orioles and the Ravens. Anything else we ought to know about Connor? What's your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject in school is writing and math, and I am going to be in Magnet next year at E. Russell Hicks.
Good for you.
Very good.
That's good.
Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Well, thank you for being here to do it. You did a great job, Connor. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Are there any amendments or any discussion? If not, the question's on Mr. Ridenour's motion to approve the agenda. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Next is the approval of minutes.
Mr. President, I would move for the adoption of minutes from a closed session held on Tuesday, April the 23rd, 2013. And we also have minutes from the business meeting held on the same date. Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Are there any amendments, corrections, or discussion? Seeing none, the question's on Mr. Bailey's motion to approve the minutes. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. As I look down the table there, I was remiss in not letting everybody know that our student representative, Amanda, is taking IB exams today. So I think we all agree that that's probably a good excuse for not coming to a board meeting. So we wish her and all of our students who are taking those types of tests this month well. Next on the agenda is a report to the board. We're pleased to have Delegate Andrew Serafini here, who is the chair of the Washington County delegation, who graciously actually reached out to us and asked if he could come to one of our meetings and brief us on the session that was just completed. So thank you, Delegate Serafini, for... And Ardithan. That's great.
Brought some light reading material for you all.
Let's work scratch this thing.
Enough, I think, for you all.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're not going to go over all half of that. We're going to have one more set to give you as well. We have enough?
Yes.
Good.
This you already sent me.
And
This could be one of those moments when someone would say, well, what else will the man pull out of his bag?
I don't pull rabbits. This is the last one. Okay. So thank you all very much. It's my pleasure to be here today. I did a similar briefing for the county commissioners a couple weeks ago, and as I finished that up, I thought it might not be a bad idea to try to do this with you all. We do meet with you pre-legislatively, which is great, and I thought it might be good to speak with you afterwards to tell you what happened. Now, you all get briefings from I'm sorry, I'm informal sometimes, I should say, Mrs. Cade and Mr. Trotta, and you get them from Mabe and that's fine. I hope to just fly through a lot of this to give you some of the stuff that I think affects us, and so you can have a little bit of perspective. I can't say that I try as best as I can today to speak for the members of the delegation, but you all know most of them, and they don't like to be spoken for, so I'll try to summarize the general consensus. I think we all do think pretty much alike up here, and for the most part, on a lot of things we do vote the same. In fact, in the whole House of Delegates, 90% of the time we vote the same, but there are those critical ones where we have differences. So I wanted to highlight for you a couple things, and as I go through this, I'm hoping you'll pick up some themes that kind of came back, and I think hopefully that will help you all as you're trying to figure out what's the state going to do to us and what is the with us, to us, and for us. So we'll try to jump through that just real quick. All right, so the first one is just the bills that we had this year. The only one that really affected you guys directly was the fall season start, and Mr. Ridenhour came down, which I was very grateful for. I think they're starting to get it. We've had this idea before, and the feedback I got later was that this is a good idea, that we made it statewide and not just for us. I think people appreciated this whole idea that it's about competitive advantage for Washington County is absolutely crazy, and it's about safety. I coached at North High years and years ago, and I had a ninth grader not use proper procedure in tackling, and he fell to the ground, and for about 5 minutes he could not move any of his limbs at all. And I'm going to tell you, in all my life, I've never been more fearful of something in that. So proper technique, it takes time. That's what we were working about. It happens in soccer, happens in volleyball, happens in a lot of sports. They did actually, though, give us 3 extra days. That was something that MPSSAA did decide. So we'll take whatever we can get. I did talk to several coaches, and same thing. Want to be safe, want to make sure kids know proper technique. The new heat acclimatization issue is something that's good, but it's always about the students and their safety. And once again, I appreciate Mr. Ridenhour and the initiative from you all to that, so thank you. If you turn to the next page, the conversation is, what do you do in economic times that are difficult? And I did have a piece Sunday that talked about this. This is Keynesian economics that says the government should step in economic difficult times, increase spending in a way to fill that gap to try to stimulate the economy until such time as it recovers. So that's what's been done at the state level, and you can see that the budget has grown in spending year over year, but unfortunately, we're still not seeing full recovery of economic activity, and as I wrote, and I hope we all understand, we're subject to specific risks in Maryland because the government, the federal government, is such a large employer to us. And many of you, your family members or neighbors, can tell you that sequestration maybe has impacted them directly, and we're hearing about this more and more. So I was able to sit on a phone call with the rating agencies when the treasurer and other members were talking to them about the unique challenges in Maryland, and we faced a $500 million shortfall because of sequestration in revenues in the state, just because we're so reliant on that number. So the next one is the budget summary. I did vote for the budget in its final form as it came out of conference. Now, Mrs. Cade would like to think that was only for disparity, which it wasn't a bad idea. No, and so would many others, which was not a bad thing, but it was really because they set aside over $1 billion of cash as a possibility. Now, some of us don't like that they took that from the pension contribution, for those of you that know that, but it's only till January. If they don't need it, we'll go back in. But we face some significant challenges with the implementation of that. So that showed you the final, what you see conference there is how it came out. The reality is, in the next page, is that we've grown the budget at a time that personal income still has not quite caught up to that. That's fine. The thing that when we're talking about school construction and bonds to be issued, we have to understand that this is another idea. It's not just spending on the budgetary, but it's also the spending on capital projects. And that has increased, but unfortunately, the next page will show you that Our debt that we take on at the state, the general obligation bonds, is financed by the state's portion of the real estate tax. And you can see in red, property tax revenues have been flatlined. And even though we're starting to see some semblance of recovery in housing, we're not going to see that really in revenues for some time. And that's a concern to us. If you turn to the next page, you can see how that impacts the budget. And you can see in the 2015 budget, we're estimating that we'll be short $211 million in revenue that would pay for the debt service that won't be there. That means that's got to come out of the general fund. Or they will have to at some point consider raising the real estate portion, real estate tax that goes to the state. You can see that number gets to be $537 million short in a couple years. So this is based on the bonds that have already been issued. So really, small changes here going forward may or may not do that. I only give this to you, the next one, because it's the concern we have in the rurals about the gas tax. Do we need money for our roads and bridges? Yes, we do. Our concern is that a disproportionate amount has been going to mass transit, and that was our concern, and it continues to be. A lot of money is going to be raised through these taxes over the next couple of years. We're concerned just about maintenance. There's new things we'd love to have built, but we need our roads and bridges to be maintained for the safety of our people and for you all to transport your students across them. And so that's the argument that we have as that moves forward, and I'm sure it will continue. Now, the next thing where it says, regardless, annual costs are projected to increase. This was the pension. The pension was changed in 2011. When I say pension, remember there's 12 different plans, but in toto, we really talked about the employees and the teachers, which impacts you all. And you can see we had this corridor method, which really did not work the way it was supposed to when it was originally. Good intentions originally. It was to make sure that in good years they made at least minimal contributions. So it was a floor. It ended up being a ceiling, and in bad years we weren't contributing enough. So you can see the top line, the blue, was how much our contributions were supposed to continue to grow. The red is year-over-year changes. The next one is what those actual amounts were. We were projected within a couple years to be up to an extra $1.8 billion annually. Well, they did change and get rid of the corridor. Good thing. Very good thing. Bipartisan support, very smart, good idea. What it does is in out years, it levels the level of growth, but you can still say from where we are today, those numbers grow dramatically. And you can see, in time, instead of 1.8 or 1.9 billion, we still over time are going to have to come up with another $1.1 billion annually to fund, and that's if the fund performs at its 7.75. So the next one, general fund pressure, we're looking at pension contributions. You can see their growth from 15 through 18. Debt service, you can see. So somehow between the two, we're going to have to come up with anywhere from $500 million to $1.1 billion of extra money just for those two programs alone, debt service and pension costs, and that's with the corridor change. Okay? The next page just shows you that at the federal level, and this is Warren Deschanel is an internal analyst, and he said there's three things that concern him: debt service, pension costs, and the bigger one is Medicaid. The state is expecting that Medicaid expense will expand by $900 million in the next 5 to 10 years. They're expecting the federal government to pay all of that. You see this chart, and the only thing, and I apologize, it's kind of rough, but at the top it shows that mandatory spending for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid now makes up about 55% of our total budget. So we can cut defense all we want, we can cut other areas all we want, but that Medicaid is going to be an issue somehow, some way that needs to be addressed. And when we as a state are expecting them to spend 100% on that $900 million increase, that may not happen, and that's going to create pressure. Why do you care? As it creates problems at the state level, it's going to roll down to the county, which is going to roll down to you all here. You're the biggest line item, you know that, for the county commissioners. They're committed to education. There's really debt service and funding education are the only two mandates that we as the state have to do by Constitution, interestingly enough. Now, if you look at the next thing, this is where the normal costs were shifted to the locals. So the calculations for you all are that your contributions are going to increase in the out years and increase significantly from something you weren't paying at all to what you will be. And this gets included in your maintenance of effort. So that is an issue that we're going to look at, that getting close to over $7 million that we've got to come up with somehow. They did change the demographics a little bit. They changed the mortality tables, they changed the inflation rate, and by that, that's what's changed your cost and increased it. And so it's going to be a factor. Now, out of that, you should know that Mako came to me and they asked me, in fact, they drafted the bill and put my name on it. That was House Bill 1414. And this was to say that many of the counties were asking, what if we opted out of the plan? Now, I can tell you, I've looked at the numbers. It's not feasible. You can try to opt out, but you're going to take all your unfunded liability with you. And no county can afford that, even Montgomery County when they looked at it. So they asked me to put it in, but they asked me to put it in because it's a one-time expense of $75,000 to put to numbers so that counties could realize this is not economically feasible, because you have to understand, as a legislator, I can ask for a bill to be drafted that would say I want Washington County or Montgomery County out, and they're going to have to pay the actuary to develop the numbers. You take 141 people that could have requested that, it could have bankrupted the state just to run that analysis. So Mako came to me and said, Delegate Serafini, we'd like you to put this in only so we can put this to rest in a one-time study so counties will know this is what it would cost. All right? Did not go forward, so we still bear that risk. Any legislator could ask for that legislation to be drafted, and the fiscal note, which drives things in our world, would have to be done. The actuary would have to do it for that individual county, and every time they do it, it's going to be $50,000 to $70,000. That was the reason why that was drafted. That was because they asked me to do it. But it hasn't happened, and so it'll be something we'll look at moving forward. Now, the good news. We did change net taxable income, the way it's calculated, and you can see that Washington County, and once again, Mrs. Cade was really on the forefront of making sure we didn't muck that up as it came forward, you know. I'm on the revenue subcommittee, and when a tax sounds like it's generating more income, as a conservative Republican, I get nervous, I break out in a sweat, and she was able to work me through that. So this was a good one, because we go from 648,000 up to 3.9 million. It's a nice increase for us. It's just by pushing the date back to November 1st, which is it's a better picture of how things are done. The next page, I just think this is interesting to see. But Washington County, for every dollar we pay in, we get 56 cents back. All right? Now, you can say, wow, well, I can tell you as an investment person, I don't think I'd be in business long if I told you, hey, give me $1 and I'll give you 56 cents back. That wouldn't really work for long. But you can see that's slightly better than the state average of 55 cents. It's much better than Montgomery County that gets 20 cents back. Anne Arundel gets about 24 cents back. I tell you this because keep this in mind. It's going to come into play because these counties that are, funding, Montgomery County feels like they're the Germany of Europe, or they're funding the other parts of the state that are needing funds. And there's some issues that come out of that. So do we make out okay? We always hear, gee, we don't get our fair share. Well, actually, in this case, we do. We are at the state average for that. You can see as a percentage, we get 130% of the mean, so that's pretty good. The next one, and these are out of order, but it's page 96. This talks about how we rank by per pupil aid. You know this. You've seen this. And in this case, in 2013, we were 8th as far as our per pupil aid amount, and you can see that. I think this is interesting. There was a conversation last year about possible requests from the state for money for a stadium. There was a $10 million amount that was in there. I received a letter from Secretary of Department of Budget and Management that said, we've given all this money to Washington County, and she specifically, Secretary Foster mentioned all the school construction money we've gotten. And I thought, wow, I do know. We've had some nice schools built here, and I'm very grateful for that always. But when you look at this number down here, we're not even at the state average. So when you all go to ask, this might be a nice chart to remind them of, is we're grateful for everything we get. And we ask for no more than the state average. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind moving forward as you all have needs and construction costs. That, especially, I don't know if you are familiar with what happened in Baltimore. Yeah. We passed a bill this year that commits $1.1 billion. Now, it's interesting because if you talk to the financial people, typically right now, if they build a school in Baltimore, the state picks up 90 to 95 cents on the dollar of the construction cost, because of their economic situations. Their point is the state is committing to $20 million a year of $60 million of payments, so they're only at 33% of the cost of the education. We have other issues that we had with that bill, but that was the rationale. I'm just trying to give you the what comes behind that. Baltimore City is in our state, and as they have problems, we're going to have to help them out. It's just the reality. A third of their properties in their city are not on the tax rolls. They're nonprofits or they're non-income producing. They have one of the highest property tax rates in the state, and it's driving people out of their city. And the people that are left, unfortunately, are not very high income. It's a problem. We'd like to say it's their problem, but they are in our state, and we are going to have to remedy that. Would that have been my first best choice? Arna Ben Basu communicated with me and said, I'd rather see us, if we're going to help them, lower their real estate tax to try to attract people to come in town. He said, I felt great schools are nice, but if you don't have anybody there, it really doesn't do anything. So, keep in mind those fights go back and forth. We do appreciate what you do with the dollars that you get here. We really do. And we think that's done. The next page, as you've seen, we know where we stand, free and reduced meals. We're up there. The next couple pages I give you just to see where we are as a county. We're very fiscally conservative in this county. Now, I tell you that because it almost comes as a criticism, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. So the rest of that you can see, just where are we compared to the rest of the state, per capita and everything else. I don't have these paginated, but the next page past where you see our bond rating is the one that I want to start talking briefly about disparity. And let me say this. This is not an advertisement for Mrs. Cade, but I have to tell you that when it came to disparity, she really pulled a significant amount of the weight in this. Senator Shank clearly, in the Senate, Senator Miller and his staff, Senator Shank and the Senate really led quite a charge. We tried and did some things, and I have some information we'll look through, but at the end of the day, and you all pushed for this too, I appreciate this. While it wasn't direct aid to education, it came to our county, you knew that it was something that meant something to us. You pulled in on this. She did a great job. She really worked it. For me, that was the one phone call that was pretty frequent. Okay, what are you doing? What are we doing? What can I get you to do?
He was also working very
Yeah,
hard
I
on
was,
it and
but
was very
I wasn't as
involved in the
successful. So I think this is a chart that was very interesting, this first one. Keep in mind, this legislation to fix the disparity issue came from DLS. There is the bill that was drafted, and it was drafted under my name, but they drafted it. I did not. They put it together. They said this was a problem. So I don't want to go too far into this. The next page, as you can just see, this is part of our presentation. Some of you are very familiar with this, and the rest of you that you aren't, God bless you, because, it really, after a while, gets mind-numbing, yes. But, we worked, as you get back to we lost out on $7.7 million just in this year, the effect of the cap. That's the disparity grant calculation, current law capped, it says at the top there, you can see that. We fought as best we could. You can see then they started developing all these, option 1, option 2. They had all of these crazy machinations, okay? What we ended up is what you see in your pack, if you're there, is option 4. And that's where we get $1.5 million. Our good friends in Wacomico County, who were grateful for Mrs. Cade's work on this, get 4.4. And good for them, and God bless. But that's what we ended up with, okay? I'll ask you to go about, I think it's 3 more pages, because this is now where it says disparity grant formula options, and it's the one that shows $6.12 million going all to Wacomico. And I want to spend just a moment on this. This is where they came to us and they said, listen, your county is not taxing your people at the full rate. Our county income piggyback is 2.8%. The maximum at the state level is 3.2. And for those counties that are only getting 20 cents back or 24 cents back, they're saying, listen, why should we help you at all if you're not willing to tax your own people to the max? Well, the deal is, the reason why we qualify for disparity is because we're going through economic difficult times. We don't generate enough tax. Our people don't have the same income per capita as the rest of the state. The last thing an economist, most of them I've ever listened to, says the last thing you do is when you're going through an economic difficult time is to raise taxes. It's only going to make things more difficult. So it's an argument we've had and we're going to continue to have, and we need to understand that, is We cut back on services. We don't do certain things. Our county commissioners asked for $20 million less in debt authorization because they're doing more with less. You guys proved that in what you did with the school nurse program. You took a program and you made it better, and you did it with less money. That's the kind of ingenuity that comes when we go through tough times. I applaud you all. You did an amazing thing. And they are paying attention to that. That's what we do in Washington County. We don't have to tax to the max, in my opinion. We're prudent with what we do. We're not asking for more than what our fair share or what an average is. And so we're going to fight that concept that we've got to tax our people. But you have to understand that's an attitude that we're getting. Okay? This idea that your pension costs are going up, well, we've provided this for all these years, you have to do that. Well, where's your taxing authority? I'm pretty sure, Dr. Harding, you don't have taxing authority, do you? Right. In
If we do, let me know.
Yeah, well, no, believe me, I'd be the last one to tell you. So somehow I think you'd find out. If we turn to the next page, we just see, what did we get disparity at our current rate? They predict for every 0.1%, we'd pick up 2.1 million. Just gives you an idea. The last page on this I want to turn to on this, and then I want to just turn over to the specific education stuff. I hope it's helpful for you to get an idea of where we are economically and some of the approaches to things. You can see that there's been some type of things given to the 11 economically depressed counties over the last couple of years. The alcohol funds, extra money was distributed not equally, not based on population. We still aren't sure how they made that decision. There was, when the pension costs came down, some counties got a disparity grant for that, and it continues, by the way. Okay, and then the regular disparity. So when we say, gee, we're not sure if 0.1% of 1% of these things that are to help these depressed areas are too much, the argument fades greatly, all right? And so we do think we do a great job locally. I think you all do a great job, and we're going to, unfortunately, be called to continue to do that. Okay? All right. I apologize a little more than you wanted to know, but if you're not able to sleep at night, that'll do it for you. Now, the next pages you maybe have already seen. I think Maeve have sent these to you. I just wanted to highlight a couple, and I want Ardith to go a little deeper, and Tony and Ardith can kind of come in behind me. I do serve now on the Education Subcommittee. I never understood why I was on environmental matters as a financial person, and I am married to a teacher. My daughter-in-law is a school dropout specialist, and my daughter is a special ed teacher. I guess that qualifies me because all the women in my life try to keep me informed on educational matters. It does matter to me. I served on a board of a private school. I understand this. Student safety is a big thing. You're already there. New construction, there is $25 million that they've put back that's going to look at that. This is the next piece that I gave you. I think that, there's a lot of ideas, but what really makes sense is yet to be determined. So that's going to be something. There was a lot of talk in making you guys go back and retrofit and do a lot of things, but the money's just not there. So I think that what we saw out of that, at least what I took away, is that new construction pretty much is going to be looked at to best practices for security in the school systems. Once again, you have systems in place already. The idea that those kind of plans are reviewed on a regular basis and stuff like that is going to be something we're all going to make sure happens in the future, and you're already doing. It's very interesting on the next page, Senate Bill 815 and House Bill 1014, truant students. I happen to be personal friends with Susie Michael, who's a PPW in this county and a wonderful person. And I hear the stories from her. So right away when I heard this, I said, listen, I think our PPWs are doing a great job. I think our school, and Delegate Kaiser, who's the chair, she said, yeah. She said, Washington County is actually a model for this, of how you should work on truancy problems. They're very concerned about it in the state. Not all counties, not all Board of Educations have the policies and procedures you have in place. So that's where this legislation is coming from. But they're only trying to pull everybody else up to where you are. And I'm not trying to blow smoke today. I'm just telling you that was very encouraging to hear that they said, you guys are already there. We're very happy with what you're doing. Okay? So that's where that is. Virtual learning, we tried to make it a requirement. This is interesting. This is another thing I think is interesting for you all to hear. We tried to make it a requirement for graduation, and boy, they really pushed back. And Dr. Wilcox was nice enough to be gentle with me, but the idea of the state legislating, curriculum to you guys, we understand. I do get that. But on one hand, they said, no, we don't want to do it there. But as Ardith is going to talk about in a second, they sure did in some other areas, okay? They're starting to step into some areas that we didn't historically, I think, educationally. I understand your fears. The best decisions are made locally. And so I was okay with us saying, hey, we'll back off of that. We just need to push virtual. I think Senator Shank and I and Dr. Wilcox and Dr. Hardings believe that. We're on that to say this is where we've got to go. And I think in a lot of aspects we're in good shape, but the rest of the state really isn't in a lot of times. So, but a lot of this was just to make sure that people with disabilities would be able to use any kind of online stuff as that goes, okay? So that's that one. Collective bargaining. Collective bargaining was a big subject. That's on the next page. And it really says, fair share being that everyone must pay dues. If you pay dues now, you should be able to vote on stuff. You weren't able to do that before. I don't think this is done. It's going to keep coming back and looking differently. If you haven't included it as part of your negotiations as a possibility, some of these things have to come moving forward. I'm not going to go deep into that. Just know I'm sure you guys are aware through MAVE and other groups that it is a subject matter that's coming up more and more. They are studying post-Labor Day start date. That's interesting.
But they killed the bill that would have eliminated Easter Monday as a required holiday.
Right. Yeah, I like the Easter Bunny. I don't know why. I think for some of us, Easter is a very sacred time, and so that was fine. The other one, and I don't think it made here, is the talk of later starts. I don't know if you are aware of that, but there's a lot of research out there that says specifically a lot of adolescents and post-adolescents can't get to sleep till 11 or 12. I would have loved that excuse. I wish I'd have had that earlier, but evidently science is backing it up, and they need so many hours of sleep. Now, very good, but you guys don't have enough buses to have all schools start at 8 or 8:30. So the logistics of the idea have not yet been worked out, but that was an interesting thing. With that, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to ask if Ardith and Tony can talk about the college readiness. Some of you have been down. If you ever get a chance, it's interesting. Our subcommittee, unlike anyone I've ever been a part of, the folks that represent the institutions have as much input as the legislatures in the subcommittee. I think that's interesting because they live it, and we usually will make a mess of things. So I think Delegate Kaiser, who supplied this separate sheet that you have, I just gave you, she sent that to me, the last thing I gave you, the front and back page, it's a summary of this as well. She really leans on that. Once again, Ardith in this one was very active. She was a good advocate for you all, as well as the school boards, to say, hey, careful what you do here, because this now gets into curriculum. This now gets into telling you all how to do your business some. And it was a lot of work. That bill was, 30 or 40 pages, yes, probably. And we were still working on it close to sine die, if it wasn't sine die. So that always concerns me. So with that, thank you for listening to me babble on, and we'll let her go forward.
Well, there were three major parts of the college readiness bill that affect secondary education. This bill is huge, and it sort of came from nowhere. It's a massive concept of making a smooth transition from secondary school through community colleges through 4-year schools, and had some very good components, but it also had some things that we had to fight and that we had to get changed. And where we ended up is that all students will be required by the end of their junior year to take tests to determine their readiness for college, and that will be in literature, literary arts, and grammar and math. I say grammar, literacy. And if they do not pass those tests by the end of their junior year, they will be required in their senior year to take transition courses, which are those courses that will hopefully prepare them for readiness to enter higher education, community college or 4-year education. Those courses will be something new. They will be courses that are going to be developed by the community, by the boards of education in conjunction with the state board, and higher ed. And presumably, although this isn't absolutely determined, if you pass those courses, then you won't have to take tests when you enter the community college. You will have been determined ready. But this is a whole new layer of classes that you're going to have to be fitting in with your 12th graders. And there are issues about whether if they need a regular English credit, and they need to take the English transition course, does it give them credit and so forth. So there are lots and lots of questions. But that's happening and that's adopted, and it'll be struggling through for the next 2 years. We did get it delayed until the PARCC test is in place because there wasn't a test for college readiness that people thought was an appropriate test until the PARCC test is completed. Secondly, all students are going to have to take 4 years of mathematics in high school, and all will have to complete second-year algebra. Those who don't take trigonometry or calculus or something in their last year will still be required to take some kind of a mathematics course. And some that may be economics, it may be financial literacy. It hasn't been determined what those courses will be. So again, there's a law, but there's a lot of thinking that's going to have to go on about what that law means. And additionally, I think you have 328 students, if I have my numbers right in my head, who too take some courses at the community college. And there is a whole new provision about dually enrolled students. Dually enrolled used to be different from concurrently enrolled. Dually enrolled meaning they were getting credit both in high school and at the college. Concurrently meant they were only getting credit at the college because they didn't need the credit in the high school. But this law seems to kind of group them together. At this current time, the student pays for those courses at the community college, and yet you are getting their full support from the state. Under this contorted plan, they will pay, you will pay 75% of the cost of those courses. But then you can charge the student up to 90% of that 75%, which I think leaves you with 7.5% of the real cost. You cannot charge that if they are on free or reduced lunch. Then that's for up to 4 courses. And then if they want to take more, and that's 4 courses in both junior and senior year. If they take more than that, then you are able to charge them the full amount that they are that you are paying out. So this looks like a huge bookkeeping effort, and it will be a very interesting bill. There are many other elements of this bill that have to do with transfer of community college credits to 4-year schools, transferring back, picking up people who almost completed but didn't complete college. So the bill is much bigger than the 3 points that I'm telling you about, but it is going to be a little bit transformational. It really grows from this whole fact that 2/3 of the kids who take take their tests for community colleges, 2/3 of them need to take remedial courses. And if you read the Washington Post Sunday, in Montgomery County, 3/4 of the students failed their math exams. It kind of brings up a lot of questions. So this is intended to make sure that these students are getting themselves ready to go into higher education. Did you want to go on with other bills?
If you want to.
I'd like,
I don't know how you are for time, so we can.
I'd just like to be sure that board members can have some dialogue with you before you have to leave. So really, it's your schedule that I think is
I'm fine.
okay.
And would you like me to go ahead with other
Sure.
legislative issues?
Yeah.
First, let me say that working with
We've got that later on the agenda.
you want me to do it
For
later?
you, if-
Okay, I'm happy to do it
Well,
later.
then I'll address one more thing. You can ask me questions. I'll leave, and you can do the real good work of your body. Let me say one last thing. Dr. Hardings was really actively involved and very concerned about what happened in Prince George's County. Some of you are aware of that. And we are concerned about that. Now, I have to just tell you so you understand what happens in Annapolis, and maybe you understand this more. As an outsider till I got there, I didn't. There is what's called local courtesy. And when a local delegation puts a bill in, the idea is you better just go ahead and let them do whatever they want to do in their local jurisdiction, because someday you're going to want something, and if you don't play nice with them, they're going to not play nice with you with your local. This bill to us, letting a county administrator, county executive take over the school board, that's how we saw it, has state ramifications in my opinion. And so several of us did go over. We did talk to our counterparts in Prince George's County. Many of them were in a tough spot themselves. They did not support it, but they had to lay off, which technically you're really not supposed to do. If you're in your seat, you're supposed to vote. They did not, some of them. And some voted against it, which is unheard of. It was very, very contentious, and I have to tell you, in our committee, we got a 10-minute lecture on what happens if you vote against local courtesy. I wouldn't say it was a threat, but it was pretty close. And it was said, you understand. And yet, even in our committee, it was pretty split. People knowing that said this is a grave concern to us. One thing for us to tell you what to do with curriculum. But it's another thing when we start taking over, usurping the authority that you all have as an elected board. And I do not support that, and I did not, nor did many of the people. And I understand there's a lot of complications there. There's a lot of things going on there. But we appreciated, I have to say, I appreciated Dr. Harding's speaking on your behalf, I'm assuming, or at least on his own behalf, to say this is a grave concern. So that's the last thing I had prepared. Any questions you have, I'd be glad to answer.
Well, I'll follow up on that. I did write the letter and I signed it, but the only way that it really came to our attention is because of MABE's activism. And because we have a board member who's on the board of directors of MABE, we were very patched into what was going on. And really the credit goes to Mrs. Brightman for keeping our board in the loop so that we could try to send that kind of correspondence when it really mattered. So the credit really goes to Mrs. Brightman and to MABE.
Great.
So is there any questions or discussion with Delegate Serafini?
Could I follow up on that train of thought? Just MABE really struggled with the same issue of local courtesy at the beginning. And then very quickly, the leadership team said this has a lot of ramifications far beyond just PG County. And I think what we're going to be doing, we, the Board of Directors and MABE, is actually looking differently at that hands-off on some local courtesy, because we feel there is a new trend, possibility of a new trend, that factions might be trying to pick off local governance authority, one county at a time, not just on this, but other issues coming forward. And so we need to be very vigilant and aware of that. And MABE, I know, is planning to, and I believe Carl Roberts has mentioned PZAM is aware of some of these concerns. So I think there will be more pressure during the next session of that on that local courtesy issue. I am also, and I'd like your feedback, there is some concern that maintenance of effort, that there may be an effort to take another bite of that one. I don't know if you're hearing any issues on that.
Well, once again, the pension costs that we outlined earlier are going to roll into that, and the problems that creates for you all and others. That was a bloody fight, and typically in an election year, they're not going to want to go back into something that was that contentious. But I don't know. I have not heard inklings. I have not seen it. I know they felt bloodied coming out of that thing. Let me go back to one last thing on local courtesy, because here's the problem. So you in Prince George's County say you want something. I don't think it's good, but I vote for it. Now people in my county say, hey, we want the same thing they have. I say, oh, no, we're not going to. Well, wait a minute. You voted for that. You see. So when it gets its nose under the tent, then, man, it can spread like wildfire, and you've established a precedent. So we have a responsibility because we represent Maryland as well as our own community. So I have not heard on maintenance, but it would be certain that I would keep my eyes and ears open.
Yeah, it looks like Mako may actually, and that might wrap around to the local courtesy where they might start picking things out of a budget line item control or whatever. There's a lot of room for a lot of mischief on a lot of levels there. And then one comment on the college and career readiness. It appears, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but I just share this publicly, that there are different private sector foundations that are the movers behind a lot of these pieces of legislation. And my concern, and I'm not speaking politically, is when we have this type of money and influence that is not elected and is not accountable to anyone, I think we all need to be aware of where that's taking us and be concerned about it.
And it's been an issue for us that we have flown the flag that we're the #1 school, and yet we have briefings every year from the MAC, the community colleges, and the MHEC saying, hey, we're having to do a lot of remediation here. So, okay, how's it happening? What's going on? Where's the coordination? I think this bill is, very aggressive. In a time where you guys are going to Common Core and we're switching, and there's so many things changing. And what are we going to do about teacher evaluations? That started to come into this. There are just too many moving parts, and yourselves, the teacher in the classroom is just struggling to keep up with the things they've had to change in the last 5 years. And now the game's going to change again, and then we're going to throw this on you all. I mean, I'm a financial person. I think the financial literacy, but once again, I don't think we should require that. We're going to trust that you guys are going to incorporate that in the classroom as you see fit in your community. Some have done it, some haven't. That's up to you. It should be done in the home, really. So that's I've learned. You all have taught me that much very well. Say step back and let you all do what you do. Let's let the teachers. Let's trust them. Let's let the administrators in the schools understand those things, and let's let the local school boards know what works. So we're with you, but we're not always in the majority. And this is not it's not a partisan thing, because it's both sides have problems with things, and yet both sides buy into some of these things, and it does concern who's driving these things sometimes.
Are there other comments? Or?
I'd like to just add that your county delegation is very on top of things, very approachable, very open door. If I walk in and want to see Delegate Serafini and he's around, he will make time. As you can hear from his kind of delivery of what they're thinking, what they're doing, they're a very responsible group, and it's a real pleasure to work with the Washington County delegation.
I'll just add a couple of comments as well before Delegate Serafini leaves. I mean, with regard to the Prince George's County bill, I know there were a number of board members who were concerned, for example, when they changed the evaluation system for teachers. And I think a lot of boards felt like they were taking the responsibility for that out of local boards' hand and moving it up to the state. And while we felt like that was an infringement on local boards' authority, it's a whole different thing when you take the ability to hire your superintendent out of a board's hands. And I think that's certainly, for me, when I saw that in the bill, that sent up all the flags that said, this is not a local. I mean, this is a whole different structure for the governance of education, which is what caused me pause. And for the remediation in the community college bill, it occurs to me that when we award a diploma to a student, which we're going to do in about a month, it's not a Washington County diploma. It's a Maryland State diploma. Right? We give diplomas to students who meet the Maryland state requirements to receive a diploma. And to get that diploma, they have the number of credits they have to pass all these high school assessments that the state mandates. So if the community colleges are then complaining that the students aren't ready for college, don't look to the local school system. Look to what the state requires to get a diploma. And I'm not saying we should make it more difficult so fewer students get diplomas, but we as a local board, we don't make decisions about what's required to get a diploma. That all comes from the state. So I offer that just as commentary. And finally, I'll just thank you and the delegation for, you mentioned the disparity grant. That certainly was an all-hands-on-deck kind of effort led by the commissioners and the delegation. One of the commissioners early on in that process said, you know, do you think all this money's coming to the school board? And I said, no, this is about Team Washington County. What's good for Washington County is good for Washington County Public Schools. It's good for the commissioners. It's good for our municipalities. And I just want to thank you for, I know how much work you did, as well as other members of the delegation, to make sure that that came through. And I just want the public to know that it is all about Team Washington County. And thanks for leading that team in Annapolis.
Thank you.
Andy, as you step away, I will share one thing. Your daughter is the only young woman at prom who took her picture with me outside of my own daughter, but I was instantly up on Instagram because she wanted proof that she was with the superintendent of schools. So I thank Lauren for that as well.
Next on the agenda is the public comment period. We have 3 individuals who've signed up to speak. First is Mary Rotz. So our policy allocates 5 minutes for members of the public to speak. Mr. Bailey's our timekeeper, and he will let me know when you're close to 5 minutes. We won't cut you off mid-sentence. The public comment period is really for us to receive comments from the public. It's really not designed for a back and forth, so, but we're very interested in hearing what you and all the other members have to say. So, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hello, my name's Mary Rotz, and my husband and I are former public school teachers in the area for over a decade. We founded Antietam Recreation. Along with our 5 children, we have operated the camp, group, dinner theater, and school field trip programs in Washington County. We've been involved in education all of our lives. Before Washington County had adopted their own character program, my daughter and I brought the Character First year-long program to Williamsport Elementary School 16 years ago. School board members Marie Byers and others saw the result and shortly afterwards adopted the Character Counts program. Early on, our family determined that we would dedicate our lives to children and find ways we could have positive impact on them. We not only wanted to develop fun, exciting, action-packed activities, but even more importantly, to inspire, encourage, and motivate them to become men and women of character. This has been our main goal in our business in the last 40 years. The reason I'm here is because Washington County in the last week has canceled all their field trips to Antietam Recreation due to the mention of God during a 20-minute lunchtime show that we do. Now, I gave each of you a flyer because of the time allotment. For over 20 years, Antietam Recreation has been entertaining schools at our facility with hands-on educational activities not available in Washington County schools. And I'm not going to go into all the activities. You can see them in the flyer and the schedule. But one of the favorite parts of the day is a dramatic production with outstanding entertainers usually including action, dance, music, and singing during their 20-minute lunch period. With suicide, drugs, and violence so rampant with young people today, we've specially designed the short time of our day to inspire and motivate students. One of the most powerful and effective motivation tools is someone's personal story and showing what made life meaningful to them and how they overcame difficulties. Performers share their stories, and they have included trampoline expert John Smith from Frederick, illusionist Brett Myers from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He did our program last year. Guinness World Record holder cowboy Andy Rotz and his horse Ija. 2 of the 3 stories these people have shared included the mention of God. God is a part of our heritage. What is included is nothing less than what is in our national monuments, on our coins, part of our national anthem, and God is our trust. The Pledge of Allegiance we just did today, one nation under God. The fact that our Supreme Court and Congress open each session with prayer. As President Ronald Reagan stated, I just happened, this is the quote, I just happen to believe the school children of the United States are entitled to the same privileges as the Supreme Court and our congressmen. We recognize that someone in attendance may feel uncomfortable with the mention of God. Therefore, prior to each show, we announce that there may be some religious content in the program. Students have always been given the opportunity to opt out and go with our staff to eat their lunch at the tables at the pool rather than stay in the main building. In our 20-plus years, school field trips to thousands and thousands of students, we have approximately 5,000 each year in May. We only know of one time anyone opted out. However, one professing atheist attended our show 2 years ago and has made it her mission to call administrators to try to eliminate our school program because at least that year she came, we mentioned God in a personal story by one of our performers, and we selected the John Denver song, Thank God I'm a Country Boy. After she called one school, they decided to take it to the parents. At that school, every parent was given written permission to their child to attend the field trip. That school did not opt out without first giving students and parents a chance to opt in, unlike Washington County has done. I have no hostility to the person who made the decision to cancel the already contracted field trips with just 2 weeks' notice. We have a list of all. You can see, if you're interested, all the contracts from all, and they're almost all the middle schools in Washington County. It'll affect our business financially. We have now probably 1,500 less public school students coming, and although the deposit's non-refundable, we just feel we can't not refund the money because the $1,100 that was given to us for deposits, because it was out of their hands. These schools have been so supportive of us through these years, and we love the people who've come, and so we will be giving back their deposits. We kind of wonder why the decision was made 2 weeks prior after we've gotten our staff and everything lined up, but we would hope that it would have been in September or sometime when we would have had advance notice. Well, we know they did not cancel the trip because they saw the program and were offended by it. As far as we know, no one from the board has come to our show. We know from experience the majority of Washington County students and teachers and parents are not offended by it. I have a whole tote back there of people, notes of appreciation and thanks by teachers and students that have attended. But we understand the reason you discontinued our field trips is because of the fear of the law, of a lawsuit. We're not doing anything illegal. We would ask you to not just consider the one person that objected, but the thousands that will now not be able to come because of your fear. But even greater concern is the whole issue of religious freedom and the rapid decline of character among our society. We fear for our school children, country, especially this county, our state. As Dr. Michael Marco pointed out to me, Rachel Scott's father told Congress after the Columbine shooting, we need a change of heart and humbly acknowledge our country was founded on the principle of a simple trust in God, and that is what this country needs. We agree. We're not willing to have a program that would eliminate what young people need most to inspire and encourage them to be the best they can be. I hope you will consider the religious freedom in our Constitution and what it really means. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time to consider this issue. I appreciate the wonderful relationships we've had with Washington County schools through the many years. I'm sorry to see that it's come to an end. I welcome any questions. I do know Northern Middle School has contacted us. Well, all the schools, of course, canceled their trips, so they contacted us. But North Middle, the teacher there has asked that we still hold her date, she said, in hopes there could be some solution to the problem.
Thank you, Mrs. Rotz. We do have a period where board members can comment after all the people who wish to speak today speak, and if any board member wishes to offer comments, that would be the time that they would do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Neil Becker. Mr. Becker?
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Wilcox. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. Again, I'm Neil Becker. I am the Vice President of the Washington County Teachers Association, and I teach at Clear Spring High School. And today, on National Teacher Day, as the chairman of the negotiating team with the association, I've been asked to share just a few thoughts regarding negotiations and why we negotiate. And first and foremost, the goal in all we do is that we receive fair compensation for the work that teachers do. As you know, and as Delegate Serafini pointed out, teachers have more and more on their plates. Support staff, administrators are all part of the same team to develop the new evaluation system, the Common Core, CES, PBIS, and all sorts of other things that have joined the plates of teachers. And with that growth and what's on teacher plates, the opposite is happening in their paychecks. Teachers are seeing not a fault of the boards, but due to changes in federal regulations, due to changes in taxes, due to changes in the teacher tax and the pension system, paychecks are smaller, especially teachers at the top of the scale. They are seeing reduced paychecks. For example, one member of our team who actually saw a pay increase of approximately 50 cents per hour, just a result of the tax changes, she sees a reduction in her paycheck of $135. That combined with the tax on employee benefits and some other issues, her total pay this year per pay is reduced approximately $240 with changes she has made in benefits, taxes, and the tax on benefits and such. The cost of insurance is going up. Employees in the system are going to see an increase. The bottom line is that steps are, though they are appreciated, they barely cover the impacts of the changes in the recent changes in the tax code. Teachers at the top of the scale are going to remain behind, and they'll be even further behind without the increases that they've worked hard over some 30, 40 years to earn. And so the goal behind our negotiations, and my reason for being here today, is to share that we have an open discussion about fair compensation for all folks who are in the unit, so that as they work hard to educate the children, as Delegate Serafini said, we are doing more and more. There's more and more on the plates of all staff in the buildings. And the goal is to be sure that they are all fairly compensated, especially those who've worked hard and the veteran teachers who've made their way to the top of the scale. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet and talk with you today, and I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Next, we have Steve Benson. Mr. Benson, welcome.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. My name is excuse me. My name is Steve Benson. I am a MSEA representative for the Washington County Teachers Association. As a representative of the association, I've been participating in the negotiations. And each and every time we sit down to negotiate a contract, we have one goal in mind, and that is to reach a fair settlement. A settlement that is fair to the Board of Education, given the constraints and the contingencies that you deal with, but also fair to the employees. We have been through several bargaining sessions. We are very close to a settlement, but we have hit a major snag between your last offer and our last offer. It appears to me that this should not be insurmountable, given how close we are to settlement. We have a situation with the board's offer of providing a step and a 1% for those persons currently at step 20 and above that would not be placed within the salary schedule, but would be only for those persons, not people reaching that level in the future. And we've been told that the board's intent is to be fair and to treat all employees equally. We support that. But equal doesn't mean identical language. It doesn't mean identical construction of a salary schedule, because different employee groups have different salary structures based upon different factors. If you want to talk about fair, look at what a teacher getting a step would be worth. Some of them making, in the salary comparison across the state, they are fifth out of 24th versus the top of our salary, which is 20 or 21 out of 23, not 24, excuse me, out of 23. They are at a much greater disadvantage. The 1% for those individuals would be half of what a teacher that is getting a step gets. I don't believe that is equitable. You have employees who have devoted 20-plus years of service to the students of Washington County, but yet they're only worth half as much as a person who is on step 5. They're all underpaid. At the top of the salary schedule, you are at a drastic disadvantage. You're about $3,500 below the state average, not the top, but the average across the state. This is a problem that needs to be addressed. By creating this temporary 21st step, you're exacerbating that problem. You're increasing that gap. Neighboring Frederick County pays their teachers at the top of the scale $10,000 more than is paid in Washington County. You have Carroll County paying $2,500 more at the top of the salary schedule than you all pay in Washington County. So to structure a salary schedule that furthers that gap, furthers that difference, and further disadvantages the people who have provided you dedicated service all over these years, I do not think is good business. You will be competing with teachers, for teachers, with your neighboring counties. All we're asking for is fairness. We would ask you to re-examine our proposal. We tried to structure it to come within the ballpark of what your proposal was, recognizing the financial contingencies that you have. We think we have done that. We have come very close to the amount of money that is contained within your offer. But we do have a problem with the inequity between those persons at the top of the scale and those further down the salaries, and also with this widening gap between what the people who have provided 20-plus years of service to Washington County get compared to what people across the state and the neighboring counties get. I would ask that you re-examine or at least take a look at the proposals and see if we can reach an agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. We now move on to board member response to public comment. Do any board members wish to offer any comments based on the public comments? I'm sorry, Mrs. Fisher reminds me. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? I'm sorry. There's no rule that says you have to sign up. If anybody feels moved to speak, now's the time. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there anybody who wishes to offer any comment based on any of the public comments offered? Mr. Ridenour?
I want to thank everybody that did speak. I'd like to speak to our negotiating partners, WCTA, and I happen to be involved with a person that is at the top of the scale, and while I would certainly appreciate more money for her and believe that her efforts are well worth more money, sitting in this chair, I have to think differently. I think the public also needs to understand when we start making these comparisons that we have a finite pool of money as a board that's available to the system for all programs, for all our employees, for salaries, for benefits, whatever the case might be. I do believe that we do our absolute best to be as fair as possible. But at some point, we have to say this is all the farther that we can go. I think, a lot of times people misconstrue looking at salaries and say, well, that's all I make. I think, we also have to understand that we have a very attractive benefit package in Washington County, and particularly in the healthcare area. I think almost anybody that works in Washington County Public Schools or even knows of people that work in Washington County Public Schools recognizes that we have one of the best health care packages available. The board pays 85% of those costs. When the health care costs go up for teachers, they go up for the board. And the average cost to the board for those benefits, for the health care benefits, are $13,500 per employee, per teacher. That is an untaxed benefit. And I think sometimes we have to take a step back, or we should take a step back, and recognize that that is an attractive benefit. It is part of our package, and I think, we're doing our best to be as fair as we possibly can. Take into consideration that Washington County is still struggling economically. Recovery has not hit Washington County as it has hit Howard or Montgomery and some other areas. We're trying to make it as good as we possibly can, but at some point, this board, excuse me, has to say this is all we can do without harming other areas. So I appreciate you coming here and advocating on behalf of your members, but I also want people to understand that we're doing the best that we can. It's an expensive proposition. 85+% of our budget goes to salary and benefits. The rest is all we have to work with for everything else. And we'll continue to negotiate in good faith, but I'm kind of befuddled because I had not recognized that we had gone public with our negotiations, but apparently now we have. I don't think that, have we, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any, I haven't even been involved in any of them. I can't be. But now all of a sudden I know what's going on with negotiations. That's troubling to me too. So again, thank you, but also to the public, understand we're doing the best we can. To my friends that are teachers, we're doing the best that we can in still a very difficult economic climate.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Are there any other members who wish to offer any comments? Mrs. Harshman?
I would just like to say that I have always maintained that the person who should have the most money is someone in medicine, because without your health you have nothing. Second should be education, because those people educate your children. Now, if we could get a whole community to think that way, teachers would have twice the salaries they have now. But we can't do that, unfortunately. So I hear people say things such as, well, you get the summer off. I always liked that one. It was summer off with no pay. They forgot that part. You get all those vacations. You really don't get all those vacations. You get the vacations, the same things the kids do, plus you have 10 extra days. So my heart is out to the teachers all the time, because I know the work you have done. And I know you deserve at least twice what you're getting. But that won't happen. So I think we have to look to see what we can afford to do. And I mentioned this at the very beginning of negotiations, that we need to do all we can. Not just, well, here's a little bit, how about that? If we have more than that little bit, we need to offer it. So I think when we get to the end, that is what we have. And I'm hoping that we have offered everything that we can.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you. That concludes public comment and board member response to public comment. Next item on the agenda is new business and the consideration of a consent agenda involving a number of things that Ms. Freeman will tell us about.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board. As Dr. Hardings mentioned, we have 7 bids this afternoon. I'm going to make a quick presentation of each of those just to refresh you and then give you an opportunity for questions. The first bid is bid 2013-47. It's gym bleacher replacement at E. Russell Hicks Middle School. The wood bleachers at the school are original when the school was constructed in 1967. They'll be replaced with new electric motorized operable bleachers this summer. The award is recommended to be made to TJ Distributors of Forest Hill, Maryland, at a total cost of $33,075. The second bid is bid 2013-48, Cosmetology HVAC Improvements at the Tech High School. Work includes removal of the ceiling grid, ceiling tiles, ductwork, and replacing ductwork and realigning piping, all with the objective of enhancing the air quality in that space. This project would also be completed this summer, and the lowest bidder, Beaver Mechanical Contractors of Hagerstown, is recommended at a total cost of $102,000. This third bid is really an RFP. We received proposals for the purchase of software, hardware, and services to be utilized in the 3D virtual high school program. Those proposals came in back in January. Staff took considerable time to review those. We looked at the qualifications and experience, as well as the functionality and the graphic qualities of the software offers that were presented. The evaluation team included the staff in instructional technology, as well as the virtual high school planning team and its advisors. They selected Active Worlds of Newburyport, Massachusetts, at a total cost of $75,447. That's for the first year. Annually thereafter, hosting fees would cost $9,697 per year, and there'd be an additional $7,500 in that second year for some additional reporting capabilities. The fourth bid is bid 2013-37 for exterior doors and windows at Hancock Middle Senior High School. This project would replace approximately 267 exterior windows and 64 exterior doors. They're original to the construction of the building or were added as part of a 1967 addition. The project will be finally completed in September, and the recommended bidder is Rockwell Construction of Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, at a cost of $901,000. The fifth bid is 2013-36, ceiling, lighting, HVAC replacement at Funkstown Elementary School. We got bids from 3 contractors for this work, and are recommending to move forward with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Callis Contractors of Hagerstown, at a total cost of $1,246,000. The sixth bid is bid 2013-39. It's for electric switchgear replacement and a generator at E. Russell Hicks Middle School. This work involves the removal and replacement of a lot of electrical components in the boiler room, includes the removal of existing electrical service switchgear and the installation of new switchgear. All electrical distribution panels will also be replaced. A new 150 kW diesel generator set with 300-gallon sub-base fuel tank would be installed underneath the generator. Work will begin really in early June and be completed by September 17th this fall. Award is recommended to be made to Ellsworth Electric of Hagerstown, Maryland, at a total cost of $268,800. That includes the alternate for the distribution panel boards being replaced, and includes a $1,000 allowance for any potential charges that we might incur from the electric company. And the final bid this afternoon is for milk for our school lunch and breakfast programs. We received bids from 4 dairies and looked at pricing delivered to the schools as well as to a central location. We're recommending to move forward with the lowest bidder, who is offering milk delivered to all of our schools in plastic bottles for a 1-year period beginning July 1st, with the options for renewing for up to 4 additional terms if pricing and service remain satisfactory. That bidder is Potomac Farms Dairy of Cumberland, Maryland, and the estimated annual total cost based on prices in April $744,938.33 for a little over 3 million individual units of milk that would be delivered to all 44 school locations. Concludes the 7 bids, and I have lots of folks here today. If you have questions, I can try to help answer those for you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move to award the bids to the lowest and responsive and responsible bidders as recommended by staff for bid 2013-47, 2013-48, 2013-40, 2013-37, 20-1336, 2013-39, and 2013-27.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Comments or discussion? Ms. Brightman, you have the right to speak first if you like.
That's fine. I'll take advantage of that. I'm looking at 2013-40, the 3D virtual high school software. I'm very supportive of this project. I guess my question, and it may go to the superintendent, is what about the proprietary rights of the content developed in this program as far as our in-house teaching, our staff, our students? What kind of registration, copyright issues should we need to start thinking about and dealing with here?
Well, the software itself is independent of any intellectual property being accrued. I mean, the software is simply a tool in this property. We will own whatever is created. We will always have to either lease or own software that will underpin it, if you will, the back room. The one thing that we are looking at right now is we are talking, at least internally, about intellectual property right. We do have one teacher who's driving a great deal of this discussion. He has mentioned the issue of intellectual property rights and residuals if in fact this would be sold to a third party, or if in fact someone approached us about purchasing or using a part of what is designed in these virtual worlds. So we're having that conversation. Right now it has been just between lay people. Attorneys will likely get involved once we have the software and we actually have a clearer picture of what it's going to look like.
Would we need to have some sort of legislation, or is this something you feel that we could develop?
I think the intellectual property rights can be dealt with by attorneys talking to each other. I don't think we need specific legislation around it. What we would have to do is take a look at what current legislation is in place that would affect intellectual property rights. My sense is at the University of Maryland, where patented inventions have been dealt with, there has been some ground plowed in this area already, as well as some of our other universities. I've actually had a bit of this conversation with our board chairperson because it's one of the things that he's done in his life with his Army contract. So.
Thank you. 2013-27 milk. For some reason, I didn't realize we offered 6 varieties. I guess what I'm asking, I know that with a lot of the fat-free and low-fat products, there is, especially with the flavored ones, they add sugar to the content to make it more tasty, because they've taken the fat and the tongue feel out of it with the fat, so they add sugar. Are we exchanging one set of problems for another when we offered flavored milk? And I've just upset a lot of children at this point. I understand that.
The old adage is, little sugar helps make the medicine go down, perhaps. But to some extent, yes, you are swapping some sugar with some fat. But studies have clearly shown that offering flavored milk and a wider variety of flavored milk increases consumption of milk in general. And in places where flavored milk has gone out, consumptions of milk have drastically decreased. What we have been able to do in working with our dairy is drive down the value, the milligrams of sugar that are in each half pint of milk over the last couple of years, to the point where the added sugar now is half of what it was, let's say, 3 years ago. So we are seeing dramatic decreases in the amount of sugar. The flavor is thinner than what it was 3 years ago, both from reductions in sugar as well as the reduction in the milk fat.
Do we track how much waste there is of a certain flavor, or like the fat-free unflavored? And I assume we adjust our purchasing accordingly, or?
Well, waste, I guess we could look at it in two ways. Waste, in one way, would be we brought this milk in and it expired, went beyond its sell-by date, so we tossed it. In that manner, we do control that level of waste, and we can, I think, through our production records, realize what's come in and what we've had to reuse. The dairy also is good for us that if we are nearing sell-by dates as they are restocking milk coolers, they will swap out. So we get some credit in that way. The other side of waste is the plate waste, which is the child took the fat-free, unflavored milk and left 4 ounces in every container and only drank half of it. That waste we don't track, but it could. We could dump it in buckets and weigh it. I mean, it could happen. It's doable.
Well, and I'm not going there.
I'm not wild about it, but it's doable.
I get that. I'm not wild about it either, but the point is, if there's a flavor or a non-flavor that's not being used, should we keep it on our choice menu?
Federal legislation requires...
of course it does.
Of course, yes. For breakfast, we have to offer 2 varieties of milk, and which is really what has kept the 1% unflavored milk around. We are required, of course, for flavored milk to be fat-free. We honestly considered going across the board to fat-free unflavored milk and just dropping the 1%, but we do have to have the 2 types of milk fat, or 2 varieties of milk, I should say, in our breakfast program. We're not willing to put flavored, let's say, in our in-classroom breakfast program. Rather than give the students that option in the breakfast program in the classroom, we decided let's keep the 1% around. So what goes up to the classrooms is fat-free white and 1% white and no flavored in those classroom breakfast programs. So it takes that choice away. So at least at the breakfast period, we're not getting that additional sugar through the milk at that point.
Interesting. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dr. Hardings, may I ask
Yes,
a milk
please.
question too?
Absolutely.
I also
I've got one of my
noticed
own, but you tee
I
yours
also
up first.
noticed the variety of milk offerings, and I know the difference between fat-free milk, chocolate milk, and strawberry milk, but can you tell me the difference between vanilla milk and fat-free milk? There can't be that much of a taste difference between milk and vanilla milk. Or
There actually is. I mean, you're talking about a vanilla flavoring.
So it's a strong vanilla flavoring.
It is a
that-
vanilla flavoring.
that kids
and
would want to drink and
The
have
vanilla
them.
is, of the flavors, it's in the number 2 spot.
Really?
It supersedes strawberry.
Okay. All right, thank you.
See.
There are other questions or comments? Mr. Bailey?
A comment that will add absolutely zero to our discussion. But when the Hancock Middle Senior High School was constructed and the Funkstown Elementary School was constructed, the cost of construction is probably about what we're putting into them for repairs, just from a historical perspective.
Are there other? Mrs. Fisher?
On bid 2013-36, the estimate was way under the reality. And I've been noticing this, it seems almost every time we get some bids, there's at least one bid that's significantly over. I realize prices are starting to go back up, but this is off by more than 30%. That kind of troubles me.
We discussed at length in Procurement Review Committee the difference in the bid versus the estimate to try to ascertain why. As you mentioned, there's another project on the list, the switchgear, where we're actually to the good considerably by $160,000. So there's a little bit of unpredictability in these estimates, and particularly in light of when the estimate was derived and made, because The construction market is in a little bit of flux right now, and it seems like in some industries, at least what I'm hearing is that prices are going up, and there's a lot more bidding going on right now. And in others, they seem to be a little bit more stable. This project is interesting because it does involve multiple trade areas, probably looking at an electrician, a mechanical, and some carpentry work, and potentially some other subcontract areas. So it may be that those multiple trades sort of exacerbate potential increases that we might be seeing there. We're also looking at a very condensed schedule for work. There's a lot of work to be done between the ceiling, lighting, and the mechanical systems at Funkstown. We did get 3 bids, and we feel that they're all competitive. I wish I could
I hear what
deliver
you're
different
saying,
news.
but, I mean, all those things you told me about this particular bid were things that you all knew ahead of time. I mean, you knew that this would involve, several different types of workers and so on. And I'm just wondering if there's something the department can do. Obviously, there are prices going up. Is there something you can do to study the rising prices in general so that our estimates are more in line with the actual bids? That's what so we have a better idea going into it. Now we have to come up with additional money somewhere.
Yeah, as I said, the estimates are prepared by the architects under consultation with, they check means data, they work with their latest experience with other construction projects. And as I said, when the market is a little bit in flux, they don't have a crystal ball more than we do, unfortunately. So it's unusual to have this much of a swing, but it's not so unusual that we would be, seeing some differences between the estimates and the actual bids. Right now, as I said, because of the market, it's a little unusual right now.
Thank you.
Are there other comments or questions?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
I had a question about bid 2013-47, the gym bleacher replacement. And noticing that the 3 bids are very close, and noticing also that the manufacturers, there are 3 different manufacturers. I'm just wondering how that's taken into consideration. Is there one product, one type of bleacher that would be more desirable than another, and that would be given consideration in the process?
In this instance, all 3 manufacturers are it's like having a Ford, a Chevy, and a Pontiac, or whatever Pontiac is existing on, but they're all pretty much the same. They just have a little bit different. They have some handrails that might be a little different. So the reason they're so close is because we're putting the same amount of seating in, the same size motors, the same size framework. So they're all 3 very competitive and very, very comparable to each other.
So you give some consideration, then you do some research into those manufacturers as to the ratings and whatnot, and
absolutely. With our experience, we've had all 3 of those manufacturers installed in our schools.
Okay.
And been very successful.
So all 3 have been represented in our buildings. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the question is on the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Freeman. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's recommended boundary realignment for Paramount and Pangbourne Elementary Schools. I'm going to ask the staff to first come and present a summary of what the superintendent's recommendation is, and then we'll seek a motion to approve. Or ask the superintendent to tell us to summarize what his recommendation is. I don't mean to be directing
Mr. Michaels
staff.
and I have had a discussion about this. We're going to be very brief in our presentation of the superintendent's recommendation, and we stand ready to answer any questions that the board has. We have forwarded all the communication that we have received relative to this to you, as I know you have forwarded the concerns that you've had to us.
Mr. Mike?
I think that's about 90% of what I was going to say. So, Dr. Hardings, members of the board, we're here today to consider a potential rezoning of the northernmost section of the Pangbourne District into the Paramount District. As the board members are aware, the FEAC committee was charged to study temporary relief for Pangbourne. Pangbourne has been experiencing ongoing growth. At one time, several years ago, we predicted for 10 years in a row Pangbourne would not grow. And particularly with one development in mind, the Cortland Manor area, we've just seen unprecedented growth that's resulted in Pangbourne growing at a much more rapid rate than ever predicted. So the board charged the FIAC committee to look at all the districts, but particularly at Pangbourne, and they did bring back their recommendation that was endorsed by the superintendent after his thorough review. As the board's aware, a couple of weeks ago, you had a public hearing on the potential rezoning of the 3 areas within the Cortland complex there to the Paramount District. As the superintendent pointed out, we have received some questions, some inquiries, and various staff members to try to provide that information back to the superintendent, which I think has been provided to the board. And a number of staff members are here this afternoon that can respond to any questions that the board might have or other unresolved issues that you may need to understand to make an informed decision. So we stand ready for that at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Is there a motion to approve the superintendent's recommended attendance zone realignment?
Mr. President, I move to accept the superintendent's proposal for a boundary realignment.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Is there a second?
I would like to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion? I've got some questions, but I'd prefer to let the other members go first.
Looking at a colleague who I thought had some questions as well. So I can start out.
Sure.
If that's all right. Even though I know that we've followed all the guidelines and all the regulations for redistricting, I know we've done all the media alert and we've gone above and beyond to get the information out, but I still feel that this has been a compressed process. And I know that even though we go the extra mile on getting the word out, it sometimes takes a while to filter into the community and to really get that wake-up call for them to understand what's going on here. For some reason, I'm having a little problem with picking out one small group, even though I know that staff feels this is a critical situation when we're going to be looking at a fairly large redistricting in just maybe a year. Unless we have some delay with West City School because of the PUD amendment, that would delay the closing of Winter Street and Conococheague and so forth. Can you just sort of address your sense as staff as to why you feel it's important to have this one small redistricting sort of out of sequence to a larger redistrict?
Right. I mean, we've had extensive discussions as staff members. I mean, Pangbourne, again, as we've talked about, it's just been a total surprise to us. The growth has not come from any other area other than this Cortland, I'll call it complex. I mean, it's the villas, the manor, the Cortland Park area. At one time, with the 432 apartments in there, when we had an apartment student generation in elementary of 0.06, even when we went up to 0.1, I mean, we'd be expecting 40 to 50 children out of that area, which is what came out of that area in the early days of the complex. It's now been open for 4 years. It continues to grow. I think we're up more like 0.4 with approximately 180 students. We haven't seen any change in that. We can't predict the economic times are going to change that. We think some of that's driven by the housing market and how people have maybe adapted to a different type of housing market that we've seen in Washington County. So it's just completely changed our predictions at Pangbourne. I don't think the original FIAC committee that made recommendations back several years ago missed anything. It was just an unknown new phenomenon for Washington County with this apartment complex. The opening of West City is still the August of 2016. So we have 4 school openings. Rob keeps reminding me it's 3 school years, but I see it as 4 school openings until we can provide that relief, 13, 14, okay. 15, and 16. Yeah. So it's a long ways away if we were to hold off any change at Pangbourne, and if Pangbourne grows as predicted by our demographer. I believe we're wrong for next year, and I don't think we'll have as many kindergartners as she has predicted, but I'm not willing to put any money on that, because for 2 years, it doesn't make any sense to me that we have kindergarten and first grade so large and such a tremendous turnover. Mr. Criswell has done some calculations on the Cortland Manor of the 156 kids that started there this September. Only 76 of those children were there the previous year. So a 50% turnover rate. The year before that, 33 of the 76 were there. So 51% turnover rate, give or take a couple percentage points. I'm going to have Chad correct me. But a tremendous turnover rate at the Cortland Apartments. That, to kind of weave in maybe where your question was going, maybe why we haven't heard too much from the Cortland complex, people don't anticipate being there very long. Some people, for various reasons, I'm sure. Hopefully they're moving out to, other.
But overall, the numbers are increasing, even though the names and faces change as they
Correct.
move in and out. So there's that turning there, but those actual seats are overall increasing. Or
They
the
are,
need for
and
those seats.
but what we haven't seen, we haven't opened any new apartments there in 4 years. So I think some of it's driven by, and I think Mr. Reidner has pointed this out, some marketing campaigns to try to fill the complex, some things like that. So I think that's what we've seen.
How many more phases are there left to build out?
We've had the exact
Oh,
same
it
number
is
open
done.
for 4 years in a row. I believe we've had 432, 442 for 4 straight years in a row. So it's not that if we were opening more apartments every year, we would obviously be predicting something very different. So we're thinking somewhere it's got to level off and stop.
I know that FIAC looked at some of the other Title I schools. What was and I've looked over the minutes from some of those meetings, but could you expand on the depth you went into with the FIAC members as to how we can be sure we're serving the same students, whichever school they would go to if it's non-Title I, because that money additional money is with Title I.
I'm going to ask Mr. Warnick to join me to respond to the instructional questions. Our Title I funding comes, based on my knowledge, based on our poverty of the entire county. And then it's up to the county to choose, unless the school is over 75%, how many schools it will serve. So we could choose to serve 3 or 4 schools. We could choose to serve 6 schools. At one time, I know we served 10 schools. So that is just some choice of how, where you compact your resources or spread your resources. But I'll let Mr. Warnick respond.
The other point is that when we look at students who may possibly fit into the Title I mold or into the free and reduced meals mold, they may not need the services that are provided. We look at students that need the services that are provided across all our schools, no matter which school that they're attending. And we differentiate our instruction based on the classroom needs, based on the supports of the school, to support any student that's struggling at any of our schools, be it a Title I school or a non-Title I school. So it's really not looking at the code that the child has. It's really looking at the needs in the classroom that the child has, and then how are we best supporting that, be it a small group instruction in the classroom, before, after programs, pull-out services if it's enrichment, or push-in services. So it's really looking at the needs of the child at all our schools, not just at having a specific code or identification to them.
Yeah, go ahead. Well,
Just real curiosity to make sure everybody understands, or if I'm wrong, correct me. If an individual student has an IEP and those IEPs include, A, B, C, D, and E, does not matter if that child is at a Title I school or at a non-Title I school. Those services are required by law, and we would have to provide those. Is that correct?
Correct, and we do provide those services to any child that has an IEP.
So if a student moves out of Title I to a new one, those services travel with him?
Correct, the same services travel to any school, and those services
We don't
are
want to
provided.
mix the funding sources, though, Steve.
Yeah.
Explain the difference
But
between
there's-
IDEA and Title I.
Title I isn't always IEP, though.
No, I understand
Yeah,
that, I understand, but I think there's a misconception that if we change or a child moves out of a school that is designated as a Title I school, that they're not going to get some of those services that they've had in the past
My
at that
understanding
school.
is that is the case, Mr. Ridenhour. In special education, no. But in a Title I targeted assistance school, children are identified according to their need. And those services are provided through
At that
Title I
school,
at
right.
that school.
I
And
understand.
and while the child may go to another school, those services would not follow that child. So by moving what I consider very at-risk and academically fragile students, my understanding is there were like 22 out of the projected 55 to 70. By moving those students, and because they are in a targeted assistance school, they have to be, as I understand it, the neediest children in that school to be getting targeted assistance services, because it's a ranking, as opposed to a school-wide Title I program where every child in that school is eligible for services. So really, in a targeted assistance school, you're identifying those that are most academically at risk.
That's correct, and it's also could be based on a focus. It may be that they're focusing on language arts compared to math. So it looks at what is the focus or the target, and then it looks at the assessment.
So these students could be receiving assistance, intervention in one area or multiple areas, correct?
Correct, just like any of our students across, all our elementary schools that, are identified for support that we are providing
Right.
support to.
It's also my understanding that a Title I school has a parent liaison who is able to work with families as a bridge between the family and the school to address needs that would be created by the socioeconomic situation of the family that go far beyond the academic needs. So those services also would not follow those students to Paramount, is that correct?
Title I schools do have a family school liaison.
So those services would not be provided to these students in a non-Title I school?
Currently, non-Title I schools do not have a family school liaison.
Is that a requirement of a Title I school, or is that just a program that we provide?
It's additional
through that?
support that we provide through the funding.
Could that
to
be
support.
done?
It could be done through the teacher, it could be done through the school. There's multiple ways that you can provide services through Title I, but within our county, we've chosen to have a family school liaison.
Mr. Ridenhour, you have anything
No,
else?
thank you.
Are there other board members with questions?
I have no
Mrs. Swin?
questions, but I have some comments.
Now's the time.
Now's the time? Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank FIAC and our staff and Dr. Wilcox for the work done in preparing this proposal. In his report, Dr. Wilcox made the statement that it's imperative that we provide our students with the very best learning environment, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I certainly agree with the intent on seeking relief for the overcrowded situation at Pangbourne. I just don't feel we're doing enough for Pangbourne. I don't feel that moving Pangbourne from a situation where there's 113% over state-rated capacity to 106% state-rated capacity, and then hearing Mr. Michael say there's not even a guarantee that Pangbourne won't continue to go beyond that. I think that there are a significant number of students who will be affected by this move, who are academically fragile and at risk, and that it would be hard-pressed for Paramount to provide services to these students. That concerns me. I would like Pangbourne to have use of the science lab that is now being used as a grade 3 classroom. I understand that a first grade classroom is now being housed in what was a special ed office. There are, as I understand it, small groups who meet in storage areas at former faculty areas, and that there are groups that meet in partitioned hallways. And yes, I understand that we're going to be facing a greater redistricting effort when we open West City, but that's, what, 2016, 2 years out. And I think 2 years is a significant portion of time out of an elementary school-age child's education. And I think that we need to do what we need to do to make the learning environments of these students the best we possibly can. And again, I say, I just don't think we're doing enough. So I'd like us to focus on how we can rather than why we can't, and find another solution to this. I'd like to see this sent back to the FIAC committee and see if there's something else that they can do to find a way to give greater relief to the situation at Pangbourne, so that we can see to it that every student has a chance to be successful in a learning environment that's conducive.
Ms. Williams, if I might, I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
want to just clarify my statement. Our demographer has predicted an incoming kindergarten class similar to the last kindergarten class in the current first grade class. What I said, although I'm not willing to bet money on it, I'm hoping that that is not, there's no rhyme or reason for it to continue to be that large unless we continue to get an influx of students from other areas where Cortland itself continues to grow somehow within the current number of apartments that are built there over the last 3 to 4 years that have already existed there. So I'm hoping that that class will come in 15 or 20 under what our demographer has predicted. We used the 55 to 60 number because we wanted to make sure we weren't overestimating how many children were taken out of Pangbourne. Right now that number is 71, but that number fluctuates among those apartments so much. So we tried to use the average, which was 5 to 6 students per apartment building, so that's how we got to the 55 to 65 number. But we were trying to underestimate how many we take out of Pangbourne. We worked, and FIAC, and I'll ask Mr. Criswell to come forward if he wants to add any comments, did have an extensive amount of discussion, talked about taking more, and I think the caution there was what we didn't want to overshoot how many children we take out of Pangbourne. Pangbourne at 100% or 100 and a couple percent is in far better shape than some of our older schools at 100%, because Pangbourne was designed with a science room that wasn't counted as part of their SRC, and some of these specialty rooms that don't exist in any of our older buildings. So as they use some of those spaces that sound like some of the other buildings, they're in a little better shape. I mean, the sheer size of Pangbourne is concerned. But Mr. Meredith was asked several times, I believe he attended all 3 of the FIAC meetings, if we can hold their number or improve their number where they're at right now, roughly 810, we will make a substantial improvement to Pangbourne. So the redistricting committee heard that loud and clear. They also potentially look at, there may be a need to take another 25 or 30 or 40 children and have some other ideas for that in another year. Just didn't want to take too big of a slice at it at one time, based on the nice space at at Pangbourne.
So, may I
Sure,
ask a
absolutely.
follow-up
The floor is
question?
yours.
So my understanding is that the state-rated capacity of Pangbourne is 745.
That's correct.
And what we, as a system, would like to see is 671.
Ideally 90%.
And currently, it's what?
810.
810, and we're going to take 55 to 70, which would bring that to,
We're trying to get back down towards SRC is ideal, but it could still be 760 or so next year if our demographer is correct in her prediction of 842
and
for
that's
next
just by
year.
moving. That's not accounting for what could be coming in. I just want to
Well,
make sure that I'm understanding.
I believe, and Chad, correct me, I think it's like roughly 842 our demographer is predicting for next year with no changes. So if we remove about 60, we're planning on being, 770, 780. Where I'm hoping our demographer is wrong by 15 or 20, we'll probably get 750, 760. Again, in a brand new school with lots of additional design spaces, it's just, all of our schools, even though state rated capacity seems to target a number, they're just not all alike in how they manage that.
I guess if I had to place a bet on whether or not the demographer would be wrong based on what's happened and the situation we find ourselves in, I know which way I'd be placing my bet. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Fisher?
I'm going to kind of change the topic here a little bit, because I understand there are a number of concerns out there from the Paramount side of this situation, specifically about the use of portables. I guess they're perhaps not used to using portables so much, even though some exist at the school. But there's some concerns about the safety and the convenience or inconvenience of portables. Can someone speak to that?
I'll just roughly share, and then I'll ask Chad. We have 75 portables in our system. Approximately 50 of those are at 18 different elementaries in Washington County. So portables, unfortunately, are a necessary evil. Board members here may recall over a number of occasions, I would like to see the elimination of portables. They're an energy hog. They have great facility needs and things like that. They're an inconvenience, but they are a necessary evil. So the 2 portables at Paramount right now, and our predictions for next year would only put Paramount at 100% without using the 2 portables. So they still would have the capacity of the 2 portables available to them at Paramount. And it wouldn't be unlike many, many other schools that we have that have the other 50 at elementary schools. So Chad, I don't know if you have something to add to that.
Pretty much stated everything. As Mr. Michael said, at 100% capacity, Paramount currently has 17 interior classrooms, and that should be sufficient to house the number of students we're projecting.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Go ahead, Ms.
No.
No, I'll just offer, ask another question as well that I've heard more from the Paramount community, which is how are they going to be able to absorb these students without more resources? And sort of the response I give is, well, we don't say this school gets this many people, this school gets this many people, regardless of who shows up on the first day of school. We try to move resources to where they can best serve the students that we're charged with serving. Can you describe a little bit, I guess on the instruction side, how those decisions are made about how to utilize the human resources that we have and how we evaluate when to add teachers to a school or when to remove a teacher from a school?
Absolutely. Currently, we're looking at, with the number of students that are moving from Pangbourne to Paramount, adding 2 additional classroom teachers as well as a 0.5 enrichment teacher. They currently have 16 classroom teachers as well as a full-time enrichment teacher. But as we're looking at that, we continuously monitor the student to staff ratio, the student to teacher ratio throughout the summer at all our schools. We actually start in the end of May, beginning of June when school lets out, and we require a weekly report from every school based on the number of students in all their grades and the classroom teachers. And we monitor that to make sure that we're in comparability as well as that, that our schools are set up equitable as much as possible to have a staff-to-student ratio very similar across our schools within each grade level. So we'll continue to monitor that, and if needed, we'll provide additional staff as needed, as we would with any school, based on enrollment throughout the summer.
And those evaluations are made throughout the year, I assume, right?
Correct.
It's not just whoever's there today, now we allocate our resources, and then we close our eyes to it for 12 months.
No,
it
we look
really
at
is an ongoing process.
Correct.
The second thing, and I'll just speak to the portables, because I had some people express concerns about portables too, and whether it's appropriate for elementary students to be in portables. And I won't disagree with anything that Mr. Michael said about it's not where I would prefer to deliver instruction if money were no object, etc. But I will tell you, my children have, maybe not one, but 2 for sure, have gone to class in portables. One, their homeroom was portable in an elementary school. And while there certainly are some challenges, there's no doubt with weather, having to go into the building for some of the encore activities, music, phys ed. So there's no, I don't mean at all to suggest that there aren't challenges that come with portables. I can tell you that from my son's experience, though, the school was very creative about taking advantage of the opportunities that you get when you're in a portable. And I asked him just yesterday, I said, what did you think of being in the portable? He said, you know what's cool about it? You can make as much noise as you want. And the teacher, who was very creative, used that fact to help her in her instruction. She would also take them on a nice day. It has a deck around it, do instruction on the deck. I'm not saying that any of this makes up for the fact that I'd rather not have to use portables, but having had my children in portables, I absolutely believe they're safe and absolutely believe that with a good teacher, fantastic instruction can be delivered in those environments. And I just say that from my experience, because I know if you haven't ever had a child there, as I hadn't at one point, you think, wow, what's this all about? But I know my kids all had very good experiences, and I say that just for the sake of those who are concerned about it. Are there other questions, Ms. Brightman?
I'd like to just finish with a comment and maybe a statement. Redistricting has always been a tough one for me, and I used to serve on FIAC years ago and agonized over it in that role, and I agonized over it, and I think Mrs. Fisher served on FIAC. And I know we're all trying to do the very best as staff and superintendent and board members for our students and their families. There's no villains here, and I get that. I keep thinking there's got to be another way to deal with these sort of issues other than redistricting. And I don't know what that looks like, or if I'm just wishing for some pixie dust and I don't have it. But I'm concerned that we're managing a problem rather than solving a problem. We're sort of just saying we're not really sure and this is the best we can come up with right now, and maybe that's where we need to be. But I look at an opportunity for this group. You're saying we have, what, 180, 200 children, elementary-aged children from the entire Cortland development. And let's just, again, throw some pixie dust out there and say, what about a quasi-charter school, maybe the Sears building right there, that we reuse that building and we put a KIPP school in there. And I'm just throwing out ideas, but I feel like we're passing something on instead of trying to solve it. So I guess I would like to see something go back to FIAC, and again, it's an overused way of describing an out-of-the-box discussion with FIAC or with the community as to what could we do to better serve this community. I don't know if we have another development in this county that has the same demographics and the same dynamics that this community has, and maybe we have some obligation to try to serve this community differently. So I just throw that out. I'm probably going to oppose this redistricting.
Thank you, Mrs. Brighton. Are there other comments? Seeing none, the question is on the motion to approve the attendance zone realignment as recommended by the superintendent. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 4-3. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Michael. Next on the agenda is the local application for federal funds. Dr. Marco?
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, board members, Dr. Wilcox. This afternoon, Jeff Gladhill, Director of Students Special Education. We are here to ask for your consideration for the FY 2014 local application for federal funds. As you know, we bring this to you this time of the year, every year for your consideration. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gladhill to provide some background information.
Thank you. Good afternoon. In your packets, you'll see that you had the data from 3 fiscal years regarding the local application for federal funds. We've pretty much been level funded each year. Back in fiscal year 2012, it was about $4.7 million, and we disaggregated that across staff, materials, administration, which is business support for the local application, and discretionary subgrants. The 2 subsequent years, in FY13 and FY14, it did go up about $100,000. But the reason it went up was because we had competitive grants in FY12 that became part of our discretionary subgrants in the following 2 years. And we're working with the state to make this a better process where we have to submit less budgetary documentation. We can consolidate it through our local priority flexibility. So we have less C-125 and budget pages to pretty much address all of our needs together as a county. So unless you have any questions about anything contained within the packet, I would like to request permission for approval of the local application for federal funds.
Is there a motion to approve the local application for federal funds?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Ridenhour, you have the right to the
Nothing
floor
at this time.
first.
Thank you.
Anybody else have comments or questions? Ms. Fisher?
This is just for my own edification. I'm not, I have two questions. I noticed, and I was just scrolling back through here to find the locations, and right now I can't find them. There were one or two places where, under categories of spending, it said fringe. And I was unfamiliar with the use of that term in this way. I'm assuming that is like extra costs for...
No, it's part of the cost of an employee for fringe benefits.
Oh, fringe benefits. Yes. All right, thank you. My other question is on page 47. Under the special ed instruction programs other, it says you were to specify in the comment box as to what those other things are, and I noticed the comment box was not filled in.
Well, I think what that might have been referring to is the actual budget category sheet that goes with that. But we can go back and look at that and make sure that has been followed up.
I just didn't want something turned down because there was something missing in the
Okay.
required paperwork.
Are there other questions or comments? Mr. Bailey?
Mr. Gladhill, is this funding used in part to place students in private institutions?
No, it's not. The majority of it, the $4.5 million, is actually just our staffing and materials. Any funding that would require a student to be in a non-public placement would actually come out of the county budget.
Okay.
Ms. Brayton?
Just a couple brief. On page 19, number 22, mentions the statement ensure that each person employed as a special ed teacher who teaches at elementary, middle, or secondary school is highly qualified by the deadline established. What is the deadline? I assume that's a date to have all of our special ed teachers highly qualified, or are they? They may already be.
To be honest with you, I think that was the date that we've already passed under House, and I think they've just left that in the grant because we report that on an annual basis as they currently are when the information goes in, because although we're reporting it as part of the application, we have a separate report that we submit. We actually just submitted it 2 weeks ago to the State Department about that for special education staff.
And the answer to the highly qualified, all of them are, or
We
you
have,
still
just off the top of my head, without having the report in front of me, I would say that there's approximately 5 or 6 that are not, and those would be teachers in our summit programs that might be teaching a class for a student that is there for the majority of the time versus being in a English class in a complete inclusive classroom. But some of our summit teachers do have model areas of certification. For example, the one I'm thinking of at a high school, the teacher is certified in math and I believe English on top of having special ed certification. And if you compare that certification status to the certification of non-public schools, which is what that program is commensurate to, some of our non-public schools have maybe 11%, 12% of their teachers that are highly qualified to teach that content area, which is a major reason why we implemented the Summit program. So when a student is able to access that inclusive setting, we can push them in, and then when they have some social issues that we need to work on, we can pull them out with the therapeutic supports right there and keep them in their home school.
So dual certified does not necessarily mean highly qualified?
No, it does not.
We certainly will provide the board with that report.
I'm looking at page 22, the projected child count. I don't see a comparison year to year. Where are we trending on special ed identification and intervention?
Last year it was 2,250. This year it's 2,200 for Part B, which is ages 6 to 20, well, that's actually 3 to 21, I'm sorry to confuse you with that. I'm separating out IFSP.
Yeah, I'm looking here, I think the total is 3 to 21 on this
Yes.
chart.
Yeah, because we have about 300 served through that program, which is considered to be Part C under federal regulations, because those are birth to 3 students. For the 3 to 21, we've decreased about 50 students from last year to this year, but we are seeing that the students we have are having a more increased need. And we've been working towards synthesizing our supports and consolidating it as much as possible in a cost-efficient manner to deliver the best services we possibly can to meet the needs of our kids.
We've experienced a significant increase in the birth to 5 population.
That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah,
So
I'm
the
sorry.
300 is well, that was birth to 3 or you're saying birth to 5?
Birth to 5. I don't
Okay.
have the specific data, but I do believe it's birth to 5. Where
They're
we've-
going to move their way through.
Which is a really positive thing in terms of making sure that we reach the students early. We're
Earlier.
finding them and providing the necessary services so that they can move on and be successful.
And do we include 504 students in this report at all?
No, we do not.
Okay. And one final, when are we as a board going to hear a review of the Summit program and its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and
That's
so forth?
something we can work on whenever you would like to have it on your agenda. We'd be happy to provide it.
Have a follow-through. Thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, I'm looking at page 22. I had some questions with regard to any possible trends as well, and I was just curious as to how these projected numbers compare to previous years, specifically children with the autism spectrum disorders or ED or students in private placement. Those were the 3 areas that I was
Okay.
wondering if we're seeing an increase in those areas, a decrease.
We haven't seen a change in the pattern, but we continue to see an increase in autism. We've actually been seeing, with the implementation of Summit program, we went from about 8.9% of our students in private separate school placements, which also includes hospitals and public separate day like Mercer Street School, down to 5.27 this past October. Last year, we were at about 5.4. So between last year and this year, we've pretty much leveled out in the 5% range, but we've brought that down, 4.27. We brought that down from about 8.9, so we cut it in half.
Okay.
Otherwise, we haven't really seen any differences in how we're progressing with the different disabilities, just with an increase in autism. A small decrease each year with the numbers, but with a higher increase of the needs that we do have.
Thank you.
Sure.
Could I have one more
Absolutely.
question? Okay,
Floor
this
is
would be
yours.
page 51, and my question, again, deals with the autism spectrum disorders. And I'm just curious about this. Maybe it's not on 51, it may be on 50.
Okay.
I'm looking at the student-staff ratio. I see that in preschool preschool, the ratio is 1 to 5, and then kindergarten to 5, it jumps 1 to 8. I would think that it would be increasingly more difficult to work with these students and help them academically as they age, but apparently the staff ratio increases in those grades.
Yeah, we try to put forth as much services as possible early on.
Early on.
And then depending on the needs we have in the programs, this is just a ratio.
Okay.
In reality, depending on, like when you had talked about the difference in the 2 schools earlier, Pangbourne and Paramount,
Right.
we look at our needs, where they're allocated at, and how we can provide the best supports possible to meet their needs. So in some cases, it might be a little bit higher, in some cases, it might be lower based on the specific students in those programs.
Okay, so you deploy your staff then as based on the needs of the students? And
Yes, and that changes through the summer with enrollment, just as we talked about earlier.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, the question's on the approval of the local application for federal funds. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Gladhill. Thank you, Dr. Marco. Next on the agenda are the third quarter FY13 budget adjustments. Mr. South?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. You received in your packet over the weekend the requested budget adjustments for the third quarter of fiscal 2013. I trust that you all have had an opportunity to at least peruse those quickly. You'll recall that there were several categories where there were some significant vacancies and turnover credit. I won't go into those items line by line unless you have some questions about them at a later time this afternoon. But there are several things I would like to point out to you with regard to this matrix that you have in front of you. First of all, on line 1 in administration, you'll notice that we have booked a save of $115,000, and that's primarily related to the fact that the Race to the Top grant did pay for part of the cost of the student information system. And what we did with that $115,000 was to move it down to line 4 to address some computer needs in the classrooms. I would call your attention next to line 5, other instructional costs, where we're booking about a $77,000 save. This is related to additional savings from students that have been adjudicated into Department of Juvenile Services programs, and we, as you recall, are now responsible for their educational costs. When we had originally been tasked with this program, we estimated approximately $500,000. If you'll recall, in second quarter, we reduced that amount to $250,000, and we believe after looking at the cost through third quarter that we have another $77,000 saved there. So that cost does not appear that it's going to be as high as we had originally anticipated that it was going to be year after year. Moving down to line 8, you'll see there a savings of $388,000. The majority of that is related to some energy savings and some snow removal savings related obviously to the fact that we had again this year a milder than average winter here for the Western Maryland area. Line 9, capital outlay, you'll see there that we have some pre-purchase cost. That was some of our due diligence cost down at the Downsville Pike property. And we anticipate that there's probably going to be another $5,000 to $10,000 that's going to hit that line in the fourth quarter. Moving down to line 10, fixed charges, we have made some full-year salary savings over the 3 quarters that we've adjusted now, and what you see there are the benefit costs that are associated with those salary savings. All that said, that brings us down to an increase in our fund balance of approximately $1,038,000, and that does bring our fund balance total to $8.1 million after the purchase of the Downsville Pike property. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, and we do request your approval of these adjustments.
Thank you, Mr. South. Is there a motion to approve the third quarter budget adjustments?
Mr. President, I move to approve the third quarter FY 2013 budget adjustments.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Comments, questions? Mrs. Brightman? Sure.
Looking at lines 2, 6, 7, and 8 about the vacancies.
Yes.
So that's a one-time savings on all of those because those positions will stay in the budget?
Those are one-time savings related to current vacancies, but the positions are still there.
Will stay in the...
The positions will be filled eventually, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, the question's on Mr. Ridenhour's motion to approve the third quarter budget adjustments. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. South.
Thanks, Chris.
Next is the superintendent's report. Dr. Wilcox.
We're going to begin with a report on our summer food and nutrition program and a recognition that has been received. And I have to turn to a page to say today that we have Mr. Schneckel here. Is he, okay. Bruce? Schenkel. Thank you. I'm sorry. Butchered your name, but we've got it said 4 or 5 times. You're a popular guy now in Washington County. He is here from MSDE. Lord, start again. He's from MSDE today, and he's here with Jeff to make an announcement about some exciting additions to our summer food service program. in addition to announcing an award from USDA. So would you two gentlemen come forward?
So good afternoon, members. Am I on here?
Yes, you are.
Good afternoon, members of the board. So my name is Bruce Schenkel, and I'm with the State Department of Education, specifically with the School and Community Nutrition Programs branch. And you may or may not know that the State Department of Education, specifically the nutrition branch, is the state administering agency for the USDA Child Nutrition Program, so National School Lunch, School Breakfast, Summer Meals Program, USDA Foods, which are USDA donated commodities, and some other programs as well. So I'm here today to actually recognize Washington County Public Schools for their participation and achievements, if you will, in the Summer Food Service Program, which is one of those USDA child nutrition programs. And each year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture asks state agencies, in this case the State Department of Education, to nominate agencies that have really shown a commitment to serving children during the summer, especially with over 47% of the children in Washington County Public Schools eligible for free and reduced price meals, which equates to over 10,000 students. It shows a level of commitment that, while it occurs across the state, I think it was important that we recognized Washington County Public Schools and the Food and Nutrition Office for their achievements and what they've done to not only expand the program, and Jeff and his staff have really, I've never been a big fan of the phrase thinking outside the box, but Jeff really has, and his staff has, and Washington County Public Schools really has thought to not only just look at what they have available within the school system itself, but partner with other agencies outside the school system, the community action councils, and has kind of gotten the ball rolling, or really gotten the momentum going to address hunger in Washington County as a whole. So just to kind of look at the Summer Food Service Program, so this is what's called the Summer Champion Award. And it's, like I said, it's USDA asks state agencies to nominate agencies that actually operate the program during the summer. So by way of just giving you an idea of what some of the things they've done last summer in 2012, which is obviously the last year that we have the statistics from, is last year they served almost 16,000 breakfasts, over 21,900 lunches, and well over 1,300 snacks, which really, while that number, put it together collectively, is an accomplishment, it's also, as you equate it to the precious federal dollars, it's brought in over $96,000 from federal funding for the nutrition programs into the county and into the school system as well. So it's just a way that the school system as a whole has really shown a commitment to serving students and the children of Washington County year-round. And as a larger picture, before I just kind of present the award, is they're serving children after school. They're serving children in the summer, and especially as we know that they're receiving school breakfast and school lunch during the school year. So they're filling in those nutrition gaps that occur from the time the school bell rings in the morning, school breakfast, school lunch. School bell rings in the afternoon, after school suppers. School bell lets out the children for the entire summer before the next school year begins. They're filling that nutrition gap during the summer months as well. So it really shows a level of commitment that we felt that needs to be recognized. So with that being said, what this is it's a U.S. Department of Agriculture Certificate of Appreciation awarded to Washington County Public Schools for their excellence in the administration and operation of the Summer Food Service Program in Maryland. So on behalf of the State Department of Education, the School and Community Nutrition Programs Branch, to really Washington County Public Schools as a whole, I'm just going to award this to Jeff and Washington County Public Schools.
Thank you very much. Jeff, would you like to make a comment, Jeff, about your team?
I would. I mean, I brought with us some of the central office team, which is so vital in support of what we do. But, because we're here in the building, it's easy for us to show up. But clearly, this award doesn't happen without the 225 staff out in the field in terms of what they do every school day. But then the staff that go above and beyond in the summertime to haul food in vans when it's 95 to 100 degrees on a humid day in the summer, and to make sure that kids get fed. And to our friends at Community Action Council, who we partner with to support the rec park programs in the county. It's just a great partnership between us, where we don't worry about the turf of who's is it a community site, is it a school site? We just worry about making sure the kids are fed, and that's the important part of the program that we do. So thank you. Thank you, Bruce. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
And thanks to you and your work at the department, because we couldn't do it without you as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you
Dr.
very much.
Wilcox, could I make a comment, please? I just wanted to thank Jeff for everything your department does. I'm not sure this community understands the high level of food insecurity a lot of our children deal with, and they leave school on a Friday afternoon and may not have a whole lot to eat until Monday morning when they come back to school. So I just want to applaud anything you and your organization can do to help them.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
The next part of the presentation, before I make a couple of comments, is really we have two leaders in the district who are going to make a presentation. But the reason I've asked them to come today is to show you the difference in what's going on with assessments. There's lots of talk about the Common Core and how we will know when our kids can demonstrate their learning. One of the things that I think we have to be prepared for as a system is as we move from the current curriculum to implementing the Maryland Common Core, and our teachers move in the way they present instruction and how they ask kids to demonstrate it, is that there will be a bit of a learning bump. And in fact, we may not be able to demonstrate as adequately as we would like how well our young people are doing and how capable they are. So we thought that we would begin by having them come up and show you an example of an MSA-like sample item on a test, and then we would show you what they might be asked to do on a park-like assessment. So if you'll come forward and kind of walk us through the process. Rick, I know you're going to come forward and do a bit of an introduction on top of what I just said, and then you'll let Sandy and Beth help you out.
Good afternoon, President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. As you know, Maryland's third wave of reform includes the adoption of 3 programs: the Common Core curriculum, a new teacher and principal evaluation, and a new assessment. The new assessment program, referred to as PARC, Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, is scheduled to be fully implemented in the 2014-15 school year. We're starting to get a picture of what these assessments are going to look like. I think to say that they are more challenging than past state assessments is an understatement. So with that said, Ms. Beth Downen, our English supervisor, and Ms. Graff, our science supervisor, are going to show you an example.
Okay, good afternoon. All right, so what we have on projected here is an example from the current Maryland State Assessment in 3rd grade. Of course, the PARC assessment, like the Maryland State Assessment, will assess students in reading and in math. So I'm just going to talk with you today about the changes in the reading world. And it's first important to note that this assessment example here, Maryland State Assessment for reading, will not change. It's not a parallel change when we go to PARC. The PARC assessment will actually be an assessment for English language arts and literacy in science, social studies, history, and the technical subjects. So that's why my colleague, Sandy Graff, is with me today, because you'll notice this particular example has a little bit of science content. I think the use of the word content there is probably not really accurate, but we chose this particular sample for MSA just to really clarify the differences. So again, this is a reading sample for MSA. This is not from the science test, the science MSA. This is from the reading test. So if we take a look at the text, first of all, this particular text, it starts out, would it be fun to be a fish? They are, after all, quite different from us. And then you skip down to the bottom of that. That means they have no need for hot soup or cold lemonade or cozy blankets or cool sandals. All in all, it's probably more fun being us. It's important to note that this particular text is not what we would call an authentic text. It was written by test writers. So again, this is the sort of text that students right now in third grade, just back in March, read this sort of passage. The type of question that we have here, after students read the text independently, asks them essentially to identify the main idea of the passage. There would also be probably 3 or 4 other multiple choice questions, probably some questions asking about vocabulary. The students might have to respond with a brief constructed response, those BCRs. The BCR would only ask the students, would only assess the students on his or her reading comprehension of this particular passage. It would not be scored for the student's writing, okay, how well the student writes. I'm going to ask Ms. Graff actually to comment on this particular text, again, a current text, and its science content.
MSA draws sources from a lot of places. This one, Beth just happened to choose a science one and invited me along. My problems with this in terms of the text and the huge gap between this and Park is that, as you said, this is a written test item that, to my way of thinking, is fanciful and is inaccurate science. If you go to the next sample, if we look at a Park assessment, this is a Park public release. There are very few of these out there for us to look at right now. But if you look at the content in this and start comparing it back and forth, this is actually from a science text. It's an elementary textbook portion. It is heavy in science language, heavy in description of science. It is accurate science. It is actually drawn from science sources. And that's what we're expecting to see in the future. Not literary text, but informational text. That's the huge jump in what's going to be evaluated. This is at a lexile level that's appropriate for third grade, but if you sit and read it, it is about animals and how animals live and how animals survive. It has not just the highlighted text science words, but it has many others that are embedded that are expected to be understood at a third grade level. And if we flip to the next page, at the questioning, the first question that's asked about that Park assessment, this is not a science assessment, you have to understand. This is a language arts assessment, a reading assessment. But it's using science text. It's using authentic text in science and social studies as the two main subjects that are going to be drawn in to test students on their understanding of reading, their reading understanding of the text. So the first question is the same as the one on the other one. It's asking for understanding of main idea. But the answer, if you look at that first question, there are actually 3 correct answers up there. There's only 1 incorrect answer. And if you follow it to the second question, in the follow-up question, they're asked to defend their answer to Part A. Why did you choose that answer, and what is your documentation? What is your evidence from the text that makes the answer you chose correct? Much, much more deep understanding, deep connection to the text. Not understanding of science. But I do need to say, before I hand this back to Beth, that I took this passage and I compared it to our current science MSA, which does draw accurate science text from a variety of sources, not textbooks, I will say. The one you just saw was a textbook example. Science MSA draws from National Geographic, draws from science, draws from a variety of scientific resources. But the questioning in science tests in Science MSA is actually about the science content. So, but it is where we teach the informational text, and that is the big connection between language arts and science right now, and how we're going to change instruction moving on. How do we in science help students to address text and understand that science text in a way that they also tie in or tie back to the English language arts standards and the English language arts skills?
So I want to tie to the very first presentation you heard about the legislation that's connected to this. Our students will be tested in grades 3 through 11 each year with this type of test. So this particular example, where the students have to, again, have a Part A, answer that correctly, and then answer Part B with evidence to support the student's answer in Part A. The text, of course, as the students go up through the grades, will become more and more complex. We've started with our first example for you, and I think we'll be coming back and to give you several other types of examples. We started with a third grade example to show you the type of complexity that our students will start with. And then we'll have, I'll be able to show you some examples with prototypes to go up through the grades. Again, I just want to note that the students won't stop here with the multiple choice type of question. The students in this particular type of prototype would, again, have other multiple choice questions. They would read probably 2 other informational texts that are linked to this text, and then the students would have to write a composition, some type of analysis that would draw connections between or among those 2 or 3 texts. And the students, in this case, with Park, will not only be assessed or scored for their reading of those 3 texts, but will also be scored and evaluated for their writing. So we have a lot of big changes coming, and of course our instruction will have to change as a result to get our students to be able to perform. All of these, the Park assessment will be assessing the Common Core state standards. So as we move forward with our instruction with Common Core, this is the assessment that will assess our students and their mastery of the Common Core state standards.
So let me share with the board, our intention is at each meeting going forward during the superintendent's portion for the next, well, for the foreseeable future, we will alternate between reading, language arts, and literacy and math with a presentation around assessments, because not just for the board, but for those who watch, so that see the expectation is changing for our young people. We'll give you in a moment a chance to ask some questions, but I would point out a couple of very important things that are happening right now. Number one, the balance between fiction, that kind of fun writing about fish, and nonfiction is flip-flopping. Today, about 70% of our texts are designed around fiction in the schools. In the years ahead, about 70% of our materials will be nonfiction with 30% fiction. A major change in the type of reading that our young people will be asked to do, all going along with this move towards the Common Core. I would also share with you that the text complexity is very important for us to take note of. And the reason it's important for us to take note of is not only are we expecting more of kids, we are right now as a school system struggling, I think, to a degree with this non-complex text. So we absolutely have to ratchet up our effort in a meaningful way, or we will have a serious, serious score drop, because our kids will not be able to demonstrate that which they've not been taught. So we have to do some things, I think, very, very differently. When you look in there at these items, you're going to see not only much more complex text, but you're going to see academic vocabulary that many of our kids don't experience in their homes. You're going to see words and concepts that kids have to have a basic understanding of prior to stepping into the exam time. So again, we're going to have to continue to educate our larger community about the expectations for their children. And that goes even to a larger issue for us, and that is background knowledge and content knowledge. Many of our young kids simply don't have the opportunity to experience life in full. And because they don't experience life in full, like some of us who have children who have the privilege of extra resources, they're at a disadvantage in this testing environment. So we as a school system are doing our part also through using computer technology and 21st century internet connectivity to open the worlds beyond our classrooms to our kids so that they have some of this content knowledge that's going to be necessary for them to apply in this new instructional world. It is a very, I think, daunting task for our teachers. Well, today they should be celebrating about now. I know most of them are back home planning new lessons, trying to design ways to get this type of learning, because our teachers clearly know what's happening. They know what's coming, but they're asking us as a school system to make sure they have the tools and supports to do this. So I want to thank you, Beth, for your presentation. Thank you, Sandy, for yours. Rick, and thank you as well for your leadership. But any questions you have for the team, they'll be happy to answer. But know that you don't have to get all your questions answered today, because they're going to be back every single month with an educational part to our board meeting.
The test writers aren't going to make typos, are they?
I hope not.
They did in this one.
Yeah, I found two. Two that would impact the comprehension of the passage.
Yep.
Longs instead of lungs,
Yeah.
I think would be a critical one in a science passage.
That's why they're prototypes.
Yeah.
Makes
You
it
know,
difficult
and
for the
I think
kids.
it also points up a problem with regard to standardized testing. You know, the results that we get are only as good as the tests that we're given. And I think often we find that there are errors in tests. And, you know, the information that we're putting in front of kids is not often as good as we hope it would be when we're assessing our students.
The good news is that there are 21 other states involved in this testing.
Yes.
And so that's good news for our teachers, because we won't be doing this work alone.
Right.
It's good news for the test writing, because there will be a lot more eyes
Right.
in advance.
Ms. Brightman?
I know that you keep referring to assessment in a singular way. My understanding is that there are going to be multiple tests throughout the year, up to 4 or 5. Has MSDE decided what the magical number is yet, as far as the number of assessments, and whether they're going to help us pay for those?
It's an assessment system.
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, they're calling it an assessment system. The summative piece, the piece that we consider the end of year, or the piece that will give us the overall score for the students, will take place in 2 separate testing situations, one around mid-March and one in May. And we're hopeful, well, we know there will be diagnostic and formative assessments that the state will have to make some decisions about, and Rick, you can speak more to that one.
Yeah. When this first started, it looked like in the model that we were given that everybody would receive 2 diagnostic or formative assessments, you know, for each one of the assessed courses, which for English was 3 through 11. Whether those are going to be developed and created by Park, they will be developed, but whether states buy them is still a question. So just because you're buying the summative test, you know, what we consider the assessment of student achievement, is, you know, we obviously are doing that, but whether or not the state is going to buy those formative assessments, I don't think has been decided. Obviously, school districts, I guess, would be able to do that on their own, but I think they're starting to have, well, I know they're starting to have an effort statewide to see if teachers want to band together to create some formative assessments to use throughout the school year in those assessed courses. So, you know, those are things that we've done for years and years, create benchmark assessments and things of that nature. And so now they're kind of seeing if teachers want to pull, they just recently sent out a little survey to see what we're currently going, you know, what each LEA is going to do, and are they interested in working with other LEAs, which kind of tells me that they're probably leaning toward not buying the formative assessments, but I don't know that for sure.
So you say they've bought these end of performance tests, the 2, are they going to pass that through to us, or are we going to take the test free of charge at the local level?
Yeah, the park
You say
assessment.
they bought the park assessments.
Right, and by
the
that I
state
mean
bought.
Maryland has bought into the whole park.
Are
so-
they going to pass that cost on to us?
No, I think it'll be just like MSA and HSA, where, you know, the tests are scored and given and all, just, you know, I mean, obviously, we're supplying all the manpower to give them and all that.
There
but-
was some talk about us having to pay for the test originally,
I haven't
and a
heard that.
per piece price per test or whatever. So that's what I was trying to clarify. And one final, when we talk about literacy, what about computer literacy as well? If all the tests are going to be on computers, So all of the kids are going to be up and rolling, right?
Yes, well, not only that, we've been talking about doing, keyboarding in early stages of elementary school and doing things like that, simply because it's a great life skill for the kids to have, but also the more skilled you are on the keyboard, the more time you have to think about your answer, not about how to get your answer on the computer. But also, there's some other techniques and things that are, there's some click and drag pieces on this assessment that our kids have never had to do on an assessment. So there are some computer skills that we're going to have to teach kids to make sure they know. Now, obviously, some kids do those things every day already, but some don't, and so we'll have to make sure that they all have those computer skills.
Our instructional technology department is working right now with typingagent.com as a way for students to access instruction for keyboarding at our elementary levels. We're working with teachers and lead teachers to beef up that instruction, because at this point, you're right, students only go to media about once a week for a half hour, and it takes a lot more than that.
And if they don't have those devices on their own,
Sure.
they don't have time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Just, if
Mr.
I may, Mr. President, and I don't know if it's a question or not, but Dr. Wilcox mentioned the 30-70 breakdown on informational reading and fiction.
Fiction and nonfiction.
And I just read an article that was kind of interesting because it made me think of that. I guess it's an apologist or someone was very pro Common Core, where he said, oh, no, that's not correct. It will not impact English teachers.
Correct.
Good luck with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
I
explain.
understand where you're coming
Right.
from, but come on, folks, if a child's, ability to move on, or, or our ability to compete well on these exams is based on, overwhelmingly informational text, it's going to feed down to English teachers.
Sure. Well, the good news is that this is an example of one of the tasks. There are 3 tasks, and one of the other tasks that I'll share with you later, that's good news for our English teachers, is that it's a literary analysis task. So our literature is definitely still part of the equation. The 70-30 split really speaks to all day long, what a student should be reading. And we've been talking a lot with our English teachers at the secondary level about what that means for the English class. And so we have defined it collectively as English teachers, that means about a 50-50 split for us. And the type of informational text that we should be reading in English class looks very different from the type of informational text in a science class. And for us, and again, this is something we're learning. We're trying to figure this out. But for us, that informational text is more literary nonfiction, so memoirs and speeches and that sort of thing.
And that's great, Beth. And I'm not beating up on you guys. You're getting dumped on too. The bottom line is we have people outside of the education field making these decisions. And it makes my head want to explode. It is not educators. Educators are dumped on that we don't have our kids ready for college. They're not career ready. They're not this. They're not that. And we're being told to do it. And I guarantee you, I can follow the paper trail to where the majority of this stuff is coming from. And it's not an educator. And it's not a group of educators. It's money. It's people with money that, are pushing this stuff down. And, with all due respect, and I know we'll get it done, hopefully we'll get it, and we don't have a choice. And I'm on my soapbox right now, but, this is nonsense. We are, the amount of work that we're putting on you, on teachers, on Dr. Wilcox, on my colleagues is just ridiculous. To prove what? I listened to the report on college and career readiness from from Delegate Serafini. Well, community colleges say their kids, we have 80% of our kids that aren't ready to go to community college. Compare the college entrance questions and material to what we've been doing for 12 years to have our kids, prepared for MSAs, HSAs, and everything else. I guarantee you they're diametrically different. Yet, because of that one test that a community college gives, we're being told your kids aren't ready to go to college. They need a remediation class. How convenient that they need a remediation class. So, I know this is, me bantering on, but it's making me about 3/4 crazy. Each and every article I read, each and every report I hear, I just, I wonder when it's going to blow up in our faces. And what the hell is going to happen when the next administration comes in? Because it's certainly changed from the one before now. When we were, Lord, I can go back 30 years and go through the litany of, this is going to change public education, and our kids will be ready when they're finished. And here we are changing again. At great cost, and great anxiety for everybody involved. So that's the Wayne bandwagon for the day and soapbox for the day, but I'm terrified by all of this. I don't know what's going to happen. I worry that we're going to end up with a shortage of teachers because at some point they're just going to wrap themselves in the head and say, I think I can probably do better somewhere else.
Well, next month, you get math.
Exactly.
And it's
And I
scarier.
want to make sure Dr. Hardings passes those exams.
I'm just glad Amanda will be
PhD in
back.
physics might not, be good enough for some of these people.
And I think what you're going to see is that each of the presentations will show you that the challenges before us are formidable. And, we have a lot of good people who are very committed to meeting the rising bar, but it's becoming increasingly difficult, and for all of the reasons that you mentioned and some of your colleagues have mentioned previously. So I want to thank you, Beth. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you. I have
Thank
one
you,
more
Beth.
comment, and part of my,
Can I
sorry.
ask one quick
Fisher wanted to
question?
ask a question.
In view of the emphasis on nonfiction, are we going to need to purchase new literature books?
E-books.
Perhaps.
We definitely need to look at increasing, expanding our libraries. I personally don't know that textbooks, in the way we've used them before, anthologies, big anthologies, is the wave of the future. Looking at lots of other ways to bring in nonfiction text.
Because there's not that much nonfiction in our...
That's absolutely correct.
But
That's
that comes back to the point that I think Beth was making earlier, that it's not just a big anthology, it's the collected original works. It's works like the Declaration of Independence, the letters from Birmingham jail, really tons and tons of open source materials that are out there that are available to us. The issue for us really then as a school system is when you find something in the public domain, who curates it, who brings it in and puts it in a way that's accessible. You can't just rely on individual teachers staying up late at night coming up with the next best lesson. And that's part of what I think Rick was alluding to when he said we're going to get some people together statewide to talk about not just assessments, whether they be formative or summative, but to talk about what do these courses look like going forward. Because again, we can't leave this to the design of our individual classroom teachers. And Ms. Fisher, I think you've identified a huge issue. There are resource deficits in this system right now that we have to address going forward. We also have discussions not just about the resources themselves, but about where the platform in which those resources live in.
Mrs. Harsher.
I had just one quick question, too. I think, Dr. Wilcox, did you say that it would change, and I know Beth said this was for the whole day, from 70 to 30, that it now is to 30 to 70 as far as fiction and nonfiction?
That's kind of a national average that's been put together, that kids spend about 70% of their time with fiction today.
Okay, but
they couldn't possibly be spending 70% with fiction the whole day.
I would say
that would
across
have to
the
be
day.
with English class.
Well, primarily, I think it's really speaking to elementary. And traditionally, in our elementary classrooms, the text that students read are fiction.
Narrative text.
Well, but then what about their science and social studies and so on? You're saying that 70% of their
I
day.
think we're quoting a statistic that's being used nationally. We're not.
But that's
what,
per day, or
per day.
is that English class?
It's the
Because
average.
I
and
too
it's-
have a great concern about the loss of literary classics and how they most likely will either do one of two things, go by the wayside, or end up as an elective that no one can afford to have a teacher teaching an elective. So,
Well, if I could, I think that statistic also really is meant to address the fact that there's not enough nonfiction reading beyond the textbook in science and social studies classes. That's what they're really pushing for. It's not to eliminate fiction from English classes, but simply that kids are going to be reading more complex text as they get older in their science and social studies classes, and really in their technical classes, all their classes, that, relying, and I'm not saying that's been true here, but I'm just saying that nationally, relying so much on just the textbook and not going out and reading those original and primary sources and things when you're in those classes. It doesn't mean they're going to put that on, that they want to put that on the back of an English teacher. I think they just want to see a lot more reading and writing in every class students take, and that the end result of that is, if they're doing that kind of reading and writing in every class, that by increasing the total amount of reading and writing they're doing, that ultimately you'll have that 70-30, that, English teachers have always had students doing a lot of reading and some writing, although that's faded because of, I think, changes in our testing system. But that's going to come back.
Let's not go there.
But I think the reading piece, it's more seeing the whole, the whole sea level rise of how much reading they're doing. It's not putting it all on the back of English teachers.
Thank you.
So it was mainly that the other classes were not reading outside the textbook.
Nationally
based
speaking.
on their subject matter, correct? Okay.
Dr. Wilcox?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go sit down.
Thank you.
I want to, before I turn this over to the next item, I want to share something. And I want to be very careful, because I don't believe that bargaining with our employee groups in public sessions like this is appropriate, and I think in some ways it's ill-conceived. So but I do want to say something, because now that it has been started, I think it's unfair to not at least talk a little bit about how the board has gotten to the point where an employee group would come today to speak to you. And so let me just share this with those who are watching on television, and for the teachers who might tune in later, who turned in to see some of the leadership of the association speak. First of all, it's important to know that when we put our budget together, we received $2.4 million in new money. That's it for this entire district, $2.4 million. After we built our budgets and really took a good look around at what we needed to do to better serve children in this community, we had a salary resource pool of only about $535,000 to pass on to all of our employees in terms of raises. This board said, Clayton, that's not good enough. Our teachers work too hard. Our ESP employees work too hard. Our administrators work too hard to just give them nothing, in essence. And so with the budget team, we went back in and we looked very carefully. At the same time, we entered into negotiations, and we've tried to be open and transparent in that process. I will tell you that we spent considerable time looking at where we had in the past found sources of funding. We looked very carefully, for example, at our OPEB contributions, and we saw that historically we had overfunded OPEB. And so we thought we could reduce our contribution there, which increased that salary resource pool. We took a look at our health insurance contributions and tried to squeeze some money out of there, knowing that we as a district would still eat an increase on top of that. And Mr. Ridenour, you've already pointed out that we pay almost $13,500 for every employee in the district for when you play with averages, because there are certainly people who get less of a contribution and certainly people who get more. But we looked at that, what we had budgeted and what we might actually need to cover those increases. We also took a look at how we addressed issues like we talked about earlier today when we were talking about the rezoning issue and the additional resources that we needed to support kids when they go there. And we had created a resource pool of about 10 teachers, and we reduced that back to 5. Now, that's when you have 1,700 classroom teachers and being able to forecast in the crystal ball, classroom by classroom across this district for 1,700 teachers, and to only have a margin of error of 5 teachers, you're asking us to be pretty precise, pretty good. But we said that we would so that we could capture back the equivalent of 5 teaching salaries to put into an expanded salary resource pool. When it was all said and done, we were able to come up with about $3 million in resources. But I would share with you that we have on the table right now for teachers $2.5 million in salary increases. That's not something to laugh at. That's not something to sneeze at. Is it enough? Perhaps not, but it's the best we can do right now if we're going to treat all of our employee groups equitably. I don't think it's fair to take those people who serve our children and support roles and say to them, you're not good enough to get a raise. I don't think we can say that to our administrative staff, that you're not good enough to get a raise. I think we have to continue to treat people fairly and equitably. I will share it with you that when we look at our proposal, we thought about how could we do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And when you look at the 1,700 classroom teachers, by funding the step increase, we provide a very substantial increase for 1,300 teachers. There are about 300 teachers at the top of our scale who perhaps won't get quite as much, but they will get something. And we will continue to cover employee insurance costs to the best of our abilities. Might we pass on some small amount? Yes, we may. But certainly not like 9% like Frederick, a county that was referenced earlier. We're not furloughing any of our employees. I think we're being responsible. The UNICEF director was in and talked about our relative pay. You know, one of the things that we look at are salary comparisons across the region. We don't just compete with Allegheny and Frederick. We compete regionally for talent. People vote with their feet on a daily basis. We've had some people who have left us this year. We've had other people who have come to us. When I take a look at our bachelor scale and you take a look at where we rank 13th out of the 36 regional districts. That's not anything to sneeze at. When I take a look at our teachers on step 10, we rank 15th out of the 36. When I take a look at master's degree, we rank 15th. When we look at 10 years experience, 14th. If we take a look at longevity, extended duty pays, advanced preparation pays, yeah, we don't stand up as well for our most senior teachers. We rank 26th out of that 36. But we continue to try to do the best that we can. And so, you know, while I struggle a little bit with the comments that were made today, I think it's important that the community knows that we're trying to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. We are the largest employer in this county. We take our budget and fiduciary responsibilities very, very seriously. And I think the community should know that we have put more dollars to this than new dollars that we actually receive from the state, which means that we're continuing to tighten our belt, we're continuing to operate more effectively and efficiently. And I can say to this board, as I just turned it into you, we are incrementally improving in almost every statistical area while we do that. Are we going fast enough, far enough? No, we're not. Could we go faster, further if we gave no employee raises but did something else? I don't think so. I think you've got to continue to treat people fairly, but fair isn't the same. And so I simply leave the board with this, that, you know what, I won't go into a long soliloquy about specifically what we're doing for classroom teachers, dollar for dollar, by cell, by step, because I don't think that's appropriate. But I do think the record should be set straight, that we are doing the best that we can, and we have more than, you know, with almost 3,000 employees, we have a great number of folks that we have to tend to. And everybody, I think, deserves something. That said, I'm going to turn this back over to the board, although I do have, after we get through personnel actions and we get into the legislative update, one more comment that I would like to make.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilcox. Next on the agenda is personnel action. Ms. Francisco.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. I'm not sure this could be any more anticlimactic than what we've just experienced, but as discussed in closed session, we do have some staff changes and personnel actions for your review.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the staff changes recommended by staff?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion? If not, the question's on the motion to approve the staff changes. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Francisco. It was anticlimactic.
Shortest seat.
Moment of few words and lots of action.
Next on the agenda is the legislative update from Ms. Cade.
Ms. Cade,
give you the
Ms. Schreiber.
Marathon Award for sticking with us for the rest of the meeting.
I
Thank
found
you
it
for that.
very instructive to hear more about the PARP test, because I've been hearing references to that in Annapolis for quite a while, but to actually see more. Thank you for putting that on the agenda.
We did it all for you.
Oh,
That said, please know that I have passed on all of the written correspondence that you and Tony have provided me, so the board is fairly well aware of what took place in the session. It is now 3 hours into the meeting. If you could kind of moderate your comments a little bit, let them have time for questions, because I think they may honestly have more questions for you based on what they've already read. So I'd
Fine.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that we've covered a good bit of the report that I sent you. The MABE report this time has been distributed to you is extremely valuable in the depth to which it goes on a number of the issues and gives you a lot of background. And I think we have spoken of the three big issues in education that passed, one being the Baltimore financing, second, the Prince George's County, and then thirdly, the college readiness. So we won't touch that anymore. I then sort of talked about good news. We've talked about disparity grants. We've talked about net taxable income. I said November 30th and should have said November 1st. Proposals to make GCEI mandatory were not accepted. This, for many counties, is bad news. For us, it's good news, because that's not mandatory funding, and it goes to the central counties where cost of living is more, and that's been funded for the last 3 years fully, even though it wasn't mandatory, where the disparity grants for the poorer counties have not been funded. And so at least they're looking at that. No revisions were made to maintenance of effort. We've spoken of that already. No changes were made to the Labor Relations Board. There was a bill in which would have really taken away from you the right to make the final decision on how money was to be spent if there was not adequate fund from the county to fund the negotiated agreement. And this would have really taken away the guts of what was passed a few years ago, the one really protective part of that bill. But the chairman of that finance committee stood his ground pretty firmly on that, and I'm sure it's going to come up again next year, but it is at least did not pass the Senate this year. It did pass the House with no problem. As well as the 3 days, and my report said 2, I'm sorry, on the athletic days, the fact is that the committee that has been making all those decisions has not had to have open meetings until now. From now on, that body is going to have the public looking at what they're thinking about, what they're going to do, and maybe Mr. Ridenour will go to their meetings and speak up regularly. So that's a very good thing for us.
Will that happen, Wayne?
Maybe a possibility.
the legislation that would have transferred the responsibility for burden of proof in cases, IEP cases, hearings, from the parents to the boards of education was really complex bill in that it really violated a Supreme Court decision. And it would have really passed to you much more responsibility, much more cost, and it had very emotional hearings, and it will be back again next year. But because it was defeated, they did establish a very powerful committee that's going to look at all of the aspects of those special education, and they will be, the committee is going to have a huge number of advocates on it. It's very overbalanced to the advocates, but they will be taking their time to really look at that whole process. Why is it working? Why isn't it working? What should be done? And so we'll be hearing more legislation, but that really bad bill did not pass. So those were the good news. Items of concern, the governor put in an increase for gasoline for transportation cost, 1% increase, but that was not accepted by the budget committees, so you get no more for funding bus transportation, but the new gas tax, which was passed, is likely to increase your costs considerably, so that leaves a gap there. And there's growing support for funding non-public schools. For the last few years, there's been a textbook program for certain non-public schools that have a limited tuition rate, and that amount was increased this year from $4.5 to $6 million, which is, a 33.33% increase. And also, in the very last moments of the legislature, when the governor put in his supplemental budget, which was maybe the last 2.5 days of the session, he included $3.5 million for capital improvements to older non-public schools. And the legislature went along with this appropriation. So this is a whole new field that is getting some funding. So it's something to be watched. I've listed task force and commissions that were established. Special education access I mentioned. Charter schools, there will be a good committee looking at the issues of our charter school legislation and the charter school experience and so forth. There's a bill, there is a task force that will look at prevailing wage as it affects school construction. There was a bill in that would have made all public school construction projects meet prevailing wage, and this was in alternate to that. The minority teacher recruitment study, the Commission on Establishment of a Maryland Educator Service Memorial, and the study of the positive and negative effects of post-Labor Day start date. Those all are task forces that will be reporting back. In terms of what you face, in terms of new requirements and policies, you must, as we've talked about before, evaluate your emergency plans and report to the state board, who will report to the legislature. And they also did establish a Center for School Safety that is going to be at Bowie State, and then there's also money in for the state police to have a similar kind of facility, but I think they'll merge those, so that there will be a continuing focus on school safety. But they didn't pass any radical things. Like at the beginning of the session, there were all kinds of pretty wild proposals on school safety. But I think what they've done is very sound. You're going to have to look at solar energy when you are looking at capital construction projects and evaluate the pros and cons of that. And if you don't use solar energy, have a rationale therefore. The agency fees, I think we spoke about before in the union negotiations. Truancy intervention we spoke about. I'm trying to be very brief. There is a new requirement that somebody in your system must receive open meeting training and then pass it along to all affected. And finally, and this is very personal to each of you, there is an increased fine for violation of the open meetings law, but it specifically defines that a member of a public body with knowledge that a meeting is being held in violation of the Open Meetings Act is subject to a civil penalty of up to $100. And so I left that very personal thing to the very end, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cade. Are there questions, discussion for part two? Mrs. Brightman?
One quick one. Any news on the petition from PG County?
In terms of whether it's going to be put to referendum? I
that
haven't
might
heard
be able to
any more. I heard
short-circuit.
just that one reference to it, and I haven't known whether the petition drive is really underway.
The deadline is the end of May, so I didn't know if anyone had heard.
I haven't, I've just gotten that one report that it was being considered, but I don't know that there's really a signature going on.
They have started. I
Yeah.
just didn't know if they were able to get all of them.
Able to get much
So,
energy.
Thank you.
A very strange bill. I agree with you.
Any other comments or questions? Dr. Wilcox?
Well, thank you. You know, Ms. Cade, one of the things that we've been blessed with are your services. And quite honestly, not long ago, one of our legislative delegation told us that in terms of the disparity grant, there was no more tougher bird dog than you on it. To the point that I believe the speaker or somebody said, Ardith, I will give this to you, just leave me alone. Now, I don't know if that's true, but based on the story and the legend that it's created around you, today what we want to do is recognize you for your service and give you a superintendent's recognition on behalf of all the Washington County School Board and say thank you very much for your service to us. You've gone above and beyond the call for this district. You brought $1.5 million to Washington County that people thought we had not a chance in heck of getting. And I will tell you, because of your effort, this school district will receive $750,000 set aside by our county commissioners based on your efforts. And I want to say thank you very much. Very few citizens have done as much for us as you have. So thank you.
I thank you very much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. This pin will get you into absolutely nothing, but it's
Thank you all very much. I appreciate this more than you know, and it has been very interesting.
Thank you, Ms. Cade. It's been a delight to work with you, and always fun to, when we're in Annapolis, to know that we'll see a friendly face. Thank you. Next is board member committee reports. Mrs. Harshman, Curriculum and Instruction.
Curriculum and Instruction met April the 23rd in the board conference room, and what we discussed, Mrs. Downing came in and gave us some information on foundational writing skill instruction, which is currently used in some of the schools, and also a review of cursive writing, mechanics, and grammar usage, all of which will be instituted in the plans for next year, many of which will be affected by the Common Core state standards. The cursive writing will start in 3rd grade and go through 5th grade. So that was a plus, and later I have a little story in the comments about cursive writing, so we were glad to have that happen. The next meeting will be Tuesday, May 28th at 12:45 in the conference room, and the agenda will be posted.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Mr. Bailey, Finance.
Yes, we met on April the 23rd. Relatively light agenda. The routine financials for the system were reviewed with Mr. Sisler. This afternoon you passed the 3rd quarter budget. The Finance Committee also reviewed those prior to coming here. and the Finance Committee, or the Finance Department, is doing some research and study on the 403B plan, and will be reporting back to the committee and to the board at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Fisher, policy?
Policy Committee met April 23rd. We discussed the 3 new requirements the state has added to its concussion policy. They involve notification of parents, athletic directors, and school nurses when a child has suffered a concussion. In addition, a written release signed by a licensed physician who is trained specifically in the evaluation and treatment of concussions now must be obtained before a student who has suffered a concussion can resume athletic activities. So that adds another a level of training by the physician that releases someone. Next, we noted that there had been no public comments on the proposed changes for the student dress code policy, so it will come up for second read at our May 21st meeting. Finally, we discussed the possibility of a dress code policy for all staff and substitute teachers. Rather than pursue a policy, however, the committee would like to recommend to the superintendent that school system staff and representatives from the associations collaborate to establish a statement and guidelines on professional dressing. This information we thought could be addressed through New Teacher Academy, at faculty meetings, and through human resources as they meet with new prospective teachers. The policy committee does have some examples of statements from other LEAs that could be considered if you're interested. And our next meeting is May 28th.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Brightman, facilities?
Thank you. Facilities met also on April 23rd in the Bester construction trailer on site. Before we went on the tour of the construction site, we discussed the planned unit development amendment that will need to go through a public hearing and a vote by the mayor and council of Hagerstown for the Hagers Crossing and the West City School property. We also discussed the ed specs, which I believe are going to be on the agenda on May 21st, unless that is changed. We're looking at design documents by mid-July, give or take. I believe we're also going to be looking at a work session for the education facility master plan, also on the 21st. We also discussed the milestone communication, a cell tower proposal, and we're going to be talking with some other competition in that to see if we're interested in using that as a possible way of raising some money. The next meeting is May 28th at the Frederick Street location at 9:45, and it's open to the public.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Mr. Ridenhour, Human Resources?
Human Resources met on the 23rd also. The highlight of the meeting, I guess, was the discussion regarding social media usage. Our HR staff is going to work on language to forward at some point to policy in regards to social media and the use of social media. It is a daunting task for our people, ever changing, as we're all aware. So I wish them the best of luck in that. I believe, are we scheduled for this month, the 28th, I believe, and we'll meet in the
8:30.
Oh, we'll meet upstairs. Conference room. That's right. Yes, the new conference room for HR.
Original time, 8:30.
Yeah, the 8:30 time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Mrs. Brightman?
And I apologize.
No
I should
apology
have,
needed.
The Board of Directors of MAVE met a week ago, I believe, and there was a consensus at that time to adjust the budget format and timeline for the budget. With a new executive director, you tend to task him or her with review of existing policies, and it's always a good time to do that process. And so we are going to be changing the budget format as well as how we time the projections of revenues and expenditures at MABE, as well as the discussion of an increase of membership fees, possibility of a fairly significant increase. That said, there is a budget and planning committee that's going to be moving on some of these issues on June 24th at 10 o'clock at the MABE office. And we're hoping to have each LEA represented at that meeting because of the significance of the changes that will be discussed. During the sign-up for these standing committees, Washington County did not have a volunteer at that time, so I'm just putting this back before my colleagues and hoping we can beg, borrow, or steal a member that could make that meeting and represent Washington County at the table.
Is anybody interested in representing us at that meeting? Maybe if we can all check our schedules and we'll put it on the agenda under miscellaneous business for our next meeting, because there's plenty of time still between May 21st and June 24th. We'll just have a quick discussion of that at the next meeting then.
Great. Thank you for your consideration.
Boyd, can we make sure that under miscellaneous business we, I should be telling you, Dr. Wilcox, not Boyd, but and
just got bypassed.
Absolutely all right.
Mrs. Harshman and Mrs. Williams, anything on the MABE Conference Planning Committee to report?
We attended the conference planning meeting down in Annapolis and chose some samples from the different community that submitted pictures for on the note cards that go out to different people who come in and speak for MABE and so on. And so that was very nice to see some of the children's work, which Washington County actually submitted and used they used the works of Washington County students last year. So I will get the names of those. I want to have that announced so the kids know, and maybe bring samples of the cards so they can see them. So that was a big issue at the time. And then we settled on some different topics for different committees within it, and it will be in the first weekend of October?
It's in October.
Yeah, first weekend of October. So you might want to mark your calendars, and hopefully everybody can go. And I don't know, was there anything else that we...
Yes, I'd like to make my fellow board members aware that there will be outstanding door prizes at the MABE conference because you'll be contributing to those door prizes. There is a committee that is looking for the donation of items to be used, and I thought perhaps it would be nice to have sort of a theme, some things that can only be found here in Washington County. So put on your thinking hats and help us come up with some things to contribute as door prizes to the MABE conference.
Somebody don't want to go around. Jackie made a face at that.
That's great. Thank you. You've given us a challenge, which is good. Thank you. Future agenda items. We've discussed a few of them already. There's another state assessment system discussion at the next meeting. Mrs. Brightman has discussed the design document, or the ed specs for West City Elementary. We have a work session on May 21st on the Educational Facilities Master Plan. And on June 4th, we've scheduled a work session on the new teacher and principal evaluation systems. So it's a chance for the superintendent to talk to the board and board members in a less formal environment to ask questions and understand how it is that we're implementing that requirement in Washington County. So that's on June 4th at 9 a.m. Two other items for my colleagues. Typically, or traditionally, we have switched to all daytime meetings in the summer. So both of our June meetings would be day meetings rather than having a day meeting and an evening meeting. We have tentatively scheduled that, but I just wanted to make sure that it was okay with all my colleagues that we made that second meeting in June a day meeting rather than an evening meeting. And finally, we're looking for a date for the July meeting. We're planning to only have one board meeting in July as so many people are on vacation, but we do have personnel actions and perhaps contracts to be approved. We're looking at July 16th. If you could all let me know over the next week or two, perhaps before the next board meeting, if that works, and if not, what dates in July might work for you so that we can schedule the July meeting. Mrs. Harshman?
I just had one other comment, and that was about the National School Board Association conference that Mrs. Williams and I attended April the 11th through the 14th. And there were two very inspirational speakers, Gina Davis, who is a movie star, and she spoke on gender in media and supported female characters in media targeting children 11 and under and doing away with stereotypes. And also Neil deGrasse Tyson did a presentation. He's a scientist, very well-known scientist, and astrophysicist. So that might sort of follow your train of thought here. And he said that he got an interesting letter from a young student asking him to please allow Pluto to be a planet again. And he said that if Mr. Tyson would please respond to him, he was not to write in cursive because he couldn't read cursive.
All right. Why don't we start board member comments, or continue board member comments? Mr. Ridenhour?
Nothing right now, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mrs. Brightman?
Yeah, just to remind everyone that it's National Teacher Appreciation Day, and I would like to thank close to, 1,700 employees, teachers that work with our students and families every day and do a great job, and we succeed because they succeed.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Mrs. Fisher?
Ms. Harshman said she had a story about cursive writing. I do too, and I was very glad to hear that during your curriculum committee that cursive writing will be emphasized once again in grades 3 through 5. But one of our coaches in one of our local high schools had asked one of his athletes to do some tasks for him, and he wrote the tasks out so that he wouldn't forget any of them or miss any of them, and he handed the paper to the young man, and the young man kind of frowned and looked at the paper for a while, and he said to the coach, "What language did you write this in?" The coach said, "English." And he said, "I can't read it." And it was written in cursive.
Wow. Mr. Bailey?
Had the real pleasure of going to Emma K. Dowd, along with staff members, superintendent, and some other folks. And the purpose was the presentation of a state golden apple to a volunteer at Emma K. Dowd, and the state comptroller was in attendance and made the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Williams?
Yes, I'd just like to comment that I too had the opportunity to attend the National School Boards Association Conference, April 11th through the 14th. And while there, I followed the new board member boot camp. And in one of the sessions, I was fortunate enough to win a door prize. And that door prize was a book, much to my delight. The title of the book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, a Leadership Fable, by Patrick Lencioni. And I have it, I've read it, and I would be willing to loan it to any of my colleagues. And I have found it so interesting that I think we might even want to consider doing a book study on the book. So it's that good. One other thing, I had the pleasure of attending a fabulous meal at Tech High Friday evening, and I'd like to thank Chef Twig and the students chefs in the culinary arts program at Tech High. This was my first opportunity to attend a themed dinner, but it won't be my last. I was overwhelmed by the number of people when we arrived. There were people lined up waiting for the doors to be open, and I was just overwhelmed by the support of the parents and the communities of the community to that dinner. So it was a great evening, and I look forward to future ones.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Harshman, anything
I
further?
think that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
And I
Sure.
would be remiss if I didn't comment on the fact that I helped to judge a contest at Salem Avenue Elementary School a week or so ago on the Constitution, and these were fifth grade participants. I was awed and amazed at the knowledge these fifth graders had of our Constitution. I probably had no idea what the Constitution even was when I was in fifth grade. So kudos to those teachers, and the students were really terrific.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I will only comment on that one of the unfortunate side effects of my appendectomy, which the newspaper covered quite well, thank you, Julie, was that I couldn't go to outdoor school with my daughter's class, which I was scheduled to do. I went with my son 2 years ago and just had a fabulous time. I did stop out there and managed to see a double rainbow as it started to rain. It was really gorgeous, but I just want to, again, as I say often, acknowledge what a fantastic job the team does out there in helping kids really get interested in nature and doing it in an engaging, exciting way. The spirit among those classes as they leave outdoor school after a week is just, it's inspiring to me. And the number of adults you run into in this county who the thing they remember most about elementary school is going to outdoor school. Now that says something about the impact that that program has had on kids for years and years and years. So that's the only comment I would offer, other than to, in addition to Teacher Appreciation Day, I'd like to also wish all the moms happy Mother's Day this weekend. I hope your husbands and children treat you as you ought to be treated, which is absolutely spoiled, at least for one day. So if there's no further business before the board, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.